Good evening and welcome to the April 2nd meeting of the Long Meadow Select Board. We'll start with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
All right. Well, the first thing I want to do is just make an adjustment to the agenda. Marie had asked us to talk about the Municipal Vulnerability Act, or money, funds that are available. So I wanted to put that in under
Wait,
new business, is that, or
we are talking about that. That's a part of the emergency preparedness conversation.
as part of emergency preparedness?
So we
Okay.
can vote on it,
Number 4.
even though it's
No,
not
it's
listed.
it's gonna be part of a presentation of an overall emergency preparedness strategy. We talked about this before.
Okay, we'll wait till we get to that then.
Yeah, the
It's
fire
not-
chief is working on that, and he'll be a part of his presentation.
It's under the,
Okay. I don't, the municipal vulnerability plan is the next step of that.
There's a bunch of things, as I reported a couple of meetings ago, there's a
Right.
bunch of things going on with emergency preparedness. Some related to the Board of Health, the MVP thing, and then a LEPC, Local Emergency Planning Committee. And we are trying to consolidate these multiple efforts under one kind of umbrella effort and tie them all together so they're not siloed efforts. And so the MVP is a part of the LEPC and everything else, and we're going to talk about tonight.
Okay.
okay, so good. Thank you, Stephen, for, is there any announcements that we need to share with the public?
Oh, yes. Well, I have one. If anybody else doesn't have one.
Yeah,
So the balloon test for the cell tower that is planned for Bliss Court
right.
by tennis courts
Glenn.
is going to be on April 21st from noon to 3 p.m. And that'll be, there's a public notice will be advertised in the paper. I just want to let everybody know in case you get calls on what's that giant balloon doing in the air. That's the balloon test for the cell tower.
Right, it's not the kind of balloon that will take people up for a ride, but it's just to see height, right?
No, I mean, somebody from Verizon's here, so I won't make the comment about once the tower's up, that's when they take you for a ride. But
No,
and I'll be honest. We've done one other balloon test a few years back. We did a balloon test there, and I didn't hear from anybody on it. But I want to make sure that people don't think we're not trying to let them know that there's this happening out here.
yeah, okay, great, thank you. Any-
Oh, yes, I got one more. There'll be a moderators forum. You know, what's turning into a tradition prior to town meetings. The moderator will be hosting a forum, and that is May 3rd.
May 3rd, that's a Thursday?
It's yes, Thursday, May 3rd at 6 p.m. And I believe it's here, but just stay tuned for details. The moderator will be sending out. We'll be promoting that as we get closer to the event.
Yeah,
But just Thursday, May 3rd, there will be a moderators forum at 6 p.m.
okay.
In fact, I could probably give you the specifics if you give me a second.
And she's mostly concerned about the warrant article number 14, which is for the adult center
Yeah, that's
funding.
I guess, the biggest article, if you will. So there will be a focus on talking about that proposal, but like the previous forums, she will address any warrant article
Any
that
article
people want to
comes up.
discuss.
So folks who wanted to talk about a specific article could go there, and I'm sure she would entertain any discussion on that, so that's good. So next, I'd like to move to resident comments.
Sorry, Greenwood.
One more?
No, at Greenwood.
Oh, it's at Greenwood.
6
Okay.
p.m. at
I
Greenwood.
wanted to comment too, if we can get someone in here.
You have an announcement
No, I have a comment to make
Well,
on
we
what
want-
Stephen said on his announcement.
on his announcement? Yes.
Maybe we explain to the people what a balloon test is. It's not just testing balloons. It's designed to go up at the exact elevation that the new tower will be erected so that they can see exactly what it will look like. That's what a balloon test is.
Yeah, you're right.
Yeah.
That would have been good information
Yeah,
too.
because a lot of people don't know what a balloon test is.
Yes.
Okay, Tom, now you can consider.
Okay, thank you, Richard.
You're welcome.
And so we'll move to resident comments. Just state your name and your address. Thanks.
My name is Steve Kennedy. I am a resident at 11 Western Drive in Long Meadow. And for the last 16 years, I've been on the Board of Registrars of Voters. until 2 days ago. And I'm appearing before you this evening, and I'll read this out to you. I'm appearing before you this evening concerning a decision made by the Select Board at its March 23, 2018 meeting concerning consideration of my reappointment as Registrar of Voters. Said appointment having been requested in writing by the Chair of the Long Meadow Democratic Town Committee. The Select Board decided to appoint a registrar from a list submitted by the Chair of the Republican Town Committee instead. An approximate 5-minute discussion of this appointment process, as recorded by Long Meadow Community Cable Television, clearly suggests to me that the board is not sufficiently versed in the registrar appointment process, and that the board is seeking a solution to make party representation to be even with 2 Democrats and 2 Republicans on the board to, your quote, make our lives easier, as more than one of you remarked. I'm here tonight to suggest a solution to your conundrum. And the solution can be found in Massachusetts General Laws, Part 1, Administration of the Government, Title 8, Elections, Chapter 51, Voters, Section 15, Board of Registrars in certain cities and towns, appointment and term of office, a portion of which I shall now read to you. Quote, there shall be in every town a Board of Registrars of Voters consisting of the town clerk and 3 other persons who shall be appointed by a writing signed by the selectmen and filed with the town clerk. In February or March of every year after the original appointment, 1 registrar shall be appointed for the term of 3 years, beginning with April 1st following. As the terms of the several registrars expire, the appointing authority, you folks, shall so appoint their successors that as nearly as possible the members of the board shall represent the 2 leading political parties, provided that the town clerk need not be enrolled in a political party. Every such appointment shall be made by the selectman or appointing authority from a list to be submitted to them by the town committee of the political party from the members of which the position is to be filled, unquote. In other words, when a Democrat registrar's 3-year term expires, that position is to be filled by a Democrat, either by appointment or reappointment. Likewise, when a Republican registrar's term expires, a Republican is appointed. There's no switching back and forth allowed by the law. The February or March appointment letter should be sent only to the party whose member is up for reappointment. For some reason, you folks sent a letter to both parties, the chairmen of both town committees, and I question why. Now, subsequent to your March 23rd meeting, Mr. LaShouza requested of me via email that I research the history of appointments over the past 16 years that I have been a registrar. When I first became a registrar in 2002, then town clerk Louise Lyons was a registered Republican, and as the town clerk, automatically a registrar of voters. The registrars then were divided equally, 2 Republicans, 2 Democrats. Following her retirement in the year 2005, subsequent town clerks have all been unenrolled voters. From 2005 until 2014, the Board of Registrars' makeup was 2 Democrats, 1 Republican, plus the unenrolled town clerk, all in accordance with Mass General Law. Charter adoption brought with it a town manager, Robin Crosby, who continued the appointment process as per Mass General Law. My review of the appointment process, dating back to 2002, has uncovered several irregularities starting approximately 8 to 10 years ago. The first involved the appointment of a voter resulted from a bulletin board posting at Town Hall rather than from the list submitted by the affected town committee. Nowhere in Chapter 51 is this allowed. The second, in 2014, resulted in the selection of a Republican to fill a position previously held by a Democrat. The chair of the Long Meadow Democratic Town Committee at the time subsequently objected, but was told that nothing could be done. The position had been filled. The third, in 2016, resulted in the selection of a Democrat to fill a position formerly held by a Republican. And the fourth is the appointment made at the March 23rd, 2018 Select Board meeting. Thankfully recorded by LCTV, minutes 50 through 55, so I could view and review your discussions. It is clear to me from my viewings that the Select Board has decided to establish some sort of its own registrar appointment process. One member suggested that the board notify the Secretary of State of its decision to proceed with such process. And now I do believe that the Secretary of State should be notified. I also note that guidance from the town manager made no reference to Mass General laws. Instead, he referred to some sort of a plan in the works to establish your own process. Another thing that became clear to me is that the board believes that the registrars have been registrars for a long time. In fact, the current Democrat is now starting his third year, and the current Republican her second. She had previously been a two-term registrar. There was a break in there. I have been on the board for 16 years and have become fairly well-versed on election law during my tenure, something I would have thought to be of value to the town of Long Meadow. I want you all to understand that I do realize that being a select board member requires that you put in a great deal of work and effort into the performance of your duties. I also understand that you have to rely upon the town manager for guidance in areas not of everyday nature. However, inasmuch as a copy of Mass General Laws, Chapter 51, Section 15 is, or at least used to be, attached to the February-March letter submitted to the effective town committee, whose member is up for appointment or reappointment, I cannot understand why the board has not acted in accordance with the referenced statute. As I have been chair of registrars for some time now, a copy of these letters used to be sent to me. The people of the town of Long Meadow, I believe, have the right to expect that the town manager and select board are conducting the town's business in accordance with Massachusetts law. I suggest that the appointment made on 23 March 2018 be vacated and that the appointment process proceed according to Massachusetts general law. I have attached to this a copy of Section 15, which is what gets sent out with the letter to the chairs saying, please submit names of folks you would like to be considered to become registrars. And that's what I have.
Well, thank you very much. All right. And,
You're welcome. Would you like a copy of this?
Sure.
Sure.
okay. And this is an issue, I know, Mark, you weren't here when we made this vote, and I've asked the town manager to consult with the town council on this, and it's something we'll revisit at some point soon. So, okay, now I know that we need to have a hearing for Verizon petitions, and I believe we'll start a couple minutes late, but we'll be up next.
I have resident comments, but I'm willing to wait.
Ask for it.
Oh, pardon?
I have resident comments.
Oh, resident comments,
I'm
will
willing to wait.
you'll have to wait until after this, yeah, if you don't mind. Yeah, thanks.
Make a motion, we call a hearing to order.
Second.
Okay, all those in favor? Okay, thank you. You could just tell us just your name and you're obviously from Verizon.
No, I'll
Oh.
be, for the record, my name is Paul Davis. I work for a company by the name of UC Synergetic. We are a contract engineering company for Verizon, doing work for Verizon, and I am here tonight representing Verizon on their behalf.
Okay. All right, so you're going to talk about telephone poles, right?
Correct, on two different streets, and hopefully everybody has the poll petition for Dwight Road and Converse Road. Basically, what's going on here is on Dwight Road, we'll start with Dwight Road, and I will read from the Verizon engineer who did the job, what his explanation is out here. There's a group of poles, 4 poles on Dwight Road, and the reasoning for the relocations for these poles are that Eversource and Verizon are relocating these poles to accommodate the road widening project out there at Dwight and Converse Road. I took the liberty last week to call the town engineer and asked him if he had any issues with the locations of the proposed poles on Dwight Road, and he had no issue with those. So basically, long story short, is the poles are being relocated for the road widening project there at the intersection.
Okay, and, I go by there almost daily, and I never really realized there was a telephone pole in the middle of that triangle.
Yep.
But that will be moving,
Correct.
which is a good thing, actually.
That's the reason for the petition.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder how many times that's been hit.
Good question. I'm not from the local area, so I don't know. But I'm sure it's been hit at least once
Yeah,
in its lifetime.
all right. I don't know if folks have any questions about the Dwight Road changes. But I do know that pole in that triangle is fairly close to the road. So I would be
Yeah.
winding, it wouldn't take very long to,
Well, I'll give you the specifics on that. The proposed relocation of that pole from where it's at now, if you are facing the pole from Dwight Road, it's going to go 8 feet to the right and 4 feet back. So it's gonna be more in the triangle and 8 feet to the right. So it's gonna be, right now, it's pretty close to the edge of the road.
yeah.
And like I said, it's gonna be placed 4 feet behind the curb, so it'll be 4 feet away from the road from where its location is, and 8 feet to the right. So
Okay.
basically, it'll be in a more secure position than what it is now.
All right. So it said relocated, it just means relocated on that same triangle?
Correct.
Okay.
Tom?
Any other questions? Yeah.
Yeah, I have, why a new pole? It said there's a new pole, T3S/E, 11-1, to be placed. It's actually, I think, north of the current poles. It's on the east side of Dwight Road.
Let's see. East side of Dwight Road. What pole number are you talking about?
It says T.3S/E.11-1, to be placed, new pole.
I don't see the one, let me look at the petition. I'm looking at the engineering prints. All right, we have a T3S, that's on the petition, so that's a stub pole. I'm not sure if that's the one you're talking about, but in regards to pole numbers, number 3, the pole being petitioned tonight is telephone pole number 3SE11-1.
Right.
Is that the one you're talking about?
It's, on mine, it says new pole. I'm just wondering why
Yeah.
we need a new pole.
Well, that's going to be a new stub pole across the street, and the current pole now is inadequate. It's small and it's very narrow, it's very thin, and it's old. So they'd like to replace that pole if possible.
I guess I don't understand. If we're going to replace there's an existing pole, T.3E25 T11.
Yep,
I assume you're saying this is the stub pole for that?
correct.
It
Across
doesn't
the
have a
street.
stub pole now,
There is a stub pole there, yes.
which is where? It doesn't show one being...
It's not on the petition plan, but it is in the field, out in the field currently, it is there. There is an existing 3S pole.
Do you happen to know where it is?
Yes, it's in the exact same location as what the pole being petitioned for tonight is.
So why does it say new pole? I mean, everything else says existing pole relocated, or, I mean, it implies it's a brand-new pole. And Paul, nothing against you, you didn't put this together, I
Right.
understand, but this drives me nuts when Verizon gives us incomplete information.
Well, I'm looking at the engineer prints here, and it says that Elco is to remove this electric pole. And you have a good point in that typically poles that are petitioned are relocated poles. It's not saying they're gonna move it to the left, to the right, forward or backwards more than 3 feet. Any pole that's petitioned has to be moved, has to be outside of a 3-foot radius. So I understand what you're saying. To answer your question, that's a good question. I'm not really certain why this T3S is on the petition, because again, hold on a second, let me read this. Elko to remove solely owned Elko pole. Currently, right now, it's an electrically owned pole, meaning only electric company is on that pole. Verizon wants to get on that pole too. So, with that being said, and being a solely owned electric pole, the only reason I can think of currently why this pole is on the petition is because Verizon wants to get on it too, with a new pole. So whether they'll place it in the same location, they didn't give me a distance here of outside of 3 feet, but that's the only reason I can think of currently why they put this on the petition.
With all due respect, I don't get it. Didn't answer my question, I don't get it. That's all right. No sense asking, because clearly we don't have enough information to answer the question.
Didn't we just have one Eversource come in and talk about pole placements in the same area? And is this just a mere Verizon asking for placement on these poles?
Well, the poles that we're talking about, the petition, like the Verizon one, is associated with our Dwight Road Corridor project, which is is heading out to bid in the very near future. There are a lot of utility poles out in that corridor. Some are owned by Verizon, some are owned by Eversource. So, and to answer your question, Mark, I don't know the reason why. I'm sure there is a reason, because there was a substantial amount of coordination between the utility companies and the engineer of the project and our town engineers. And, utility coordination was one of the things that happened early on in the project. So I could probably get that information from Andy Farrar, if you want. But I do know that this is something that, the reason why he had no comments was because he was involved in the design process from the very beginning.
But that's a good question. I'll ask that question myself.
Okay, any other questions on the Dwight Road section of this petition? Maybe we could move on to Converse Street, I guess. Now you have 2 diagrams. Which one do you want to start with? Which Converse, there's 2.
I have one pole here on Converse Street
The new
being
pole.
petitioned.
It's on the south side of Commerce Street.
Yeah,
Now, this pole, which is T2S E37/84S,
yeah.
is again a stub pole across the street from the main pole line. And I took a look at this one too, and currently the existing pole is in front of the sidewalk, the brand new sidewalk, and the guy wire goes down at an angle across the sidewalk, which is obviously dangerous for pedestrians to walk under, so on and so forth. So the engineering drawing here has it being moved back on the back side of the sidewalk, out of the way of pedestrian traffic, 10 feet. That's the reason for the petition for that pole. So this one is being moved, relocated.
Well, that's not what my diagram shows. Dated February 7th, 2018. It shows the existing pole T2/E2 just staying where it is and putting a stub pole across the street from that. You're showing that pole is moving?
Yes, and again, this pole as well is currently occupied by the electric company only. And Verizon, I believe, wants to get on this pole as well. So again, as far as the engineering notes that I have, this pole is being moved to the back side of the sidewalk.
Okay. Do you have any other questions on this pole?
There were, to accommodate the sidewalks, there did need to be pole relocations, that I do know.
Can I ask?
Yeah.
This isn't a question, this is a statement. If we're being asked to do anything more than rubber stamp something, we need better information. I gotta tell you, I'm voting against these because the information we have is terrible. I understand there's probably a time constraint, there's probably all kinds of other things. But if Verizon wants us to do this, they gotta send somebody who knows what they're doing and send us decent information. This isn't a rubber stamp board. We're here to determine whether or not we actually need poles. And when we're adding, I don't have any problem moving the pole in the island 5 feet. clearly that needs to be done, it was well explained. A couple of the others, I can see we're moving them away from the widened road. But every time they come in here, we need a stub pole, which is one more pole in town, nothing more than to support their wires and poles, because they want to put more wires on the poles when we're actively trying to get less poles put up and put more wires underground. To have a wire, a guy wire go across the street simply to support a pole, which we're being told now is being moved, which doesn't show it's being moved. I can't vote for it. And very honestly, I'd encourage everybody else on the board not to vote for it either, because if you're voting for it, it means it's a take my word for it. And if that's what how we're gonna run our hearings on this kind of stuff, why hold them?
And Tom?
Yes.
I guess there are times where we sit through these hearings, Mark, and I agree that it just seems like they're just trying to, we're here, we gave you the paper, say yes. If this wasn't our project, I'd probably feel the same way as you, but this whole thing is being driven by our project, the town's project. They wouldn't be here doing this if it wasn't for our project, and that's where, you're right, the information is still lagging.
But they owe us sufficient information so we can make an informed decision on where poles are going and where they're moving and why they're being put in there. I asked the simple question, why we have a new pole, and we don't have sufficient, I read through everything, it doesn't say it. And I hear you, Stephen, we're driving this
Right.
this petition.
Particular,
I get it. Still no
the
reason
quality
to-
of the information, I'm not going to argue with you
Right.
about, because I
All right, I get it.
this is kind of above my pay grade, looking, figuring this stuff out. But I know that the people who are, Andy Carr, our town engineer, and the designer were engaged with them, as I stated at the beginning. And so I just, the context of this is something that we generally should be supportive of, even if you aren't supportive of the format in which it's being delivered. That's all I'm saying.
And I support the context of it, but not the format, for what that's worth.
And, well, could any of this stuff be put underground? Because it's obviously, this new project's gonna need more Verizon connections. Is that part of this, or no?
No.
No. So it's the same, it would just make the adjustments to the road, but the road's gonna be tore up, and would this be a time to put stuff underground?
It would if you were, repaving and redoing the road, yes. However, I mean, Verizon and Eversource, along with your town engineer, as far as I understand, have all gotten together and looked at this plan, put it together, put it on the petition plan, and nobody has any issues with it, including the town engineer, who I spoke to last week, and I asked him specifically, before I go to the petition hearing, do you have any issues with the pole locations? He said, nope, everything's fine, you should be perfectly fine.
Mm-hmm.
So that's about as much as I know about it. But to put it underground, you can't put these poles underground. If you could, the utilities would have been put underground in the first place.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess to answer your question, that would be no.
I'd like to challenge that comment, only because we've been told they don't put them underground for costs.
That too.
Because
There's
we are
many-
repaving the roads. This is a total remake. Now would be the perfect time to do it, but it's a cost issue. It's got nothing to do with whether it makes
There's
sense
a lot
or
of
not.
reasons, yeah.
Right.
That's one of
If
many.
we wanted to pay for it as a part of the project, they would happily do it. Of course,
I
we'd
get
be
it.
here in 2021 trying to figure out when the project was going to get done.
I
We did it that
hear
way,
you.
but
Okay. And any other comments on the Congress Street poll? Okay, then we could move to the third diagram. Is there anything new on this one that we need to?
With third
Well,
diagram.
we had
is that-
three different,
No, we don't.
Yes,
we
two.
downloaded three, one was a duplicate. Is that
One was
right?
just attached to the review by Andy.
Right.
Okay, all right, so, all right, good. So, I guess we would have a motion, would we be looking for would we need to close the hearing?
Yeah, we can close the
Yeah,
hearing.
right.
Motion
We're
to
gonna
close.
get to them.
Okay,
Second.
okay, all those in favor of closing the hearing? Okay. Any further discussion?
Yeah, I'd
Steve?
like to make a
Richard?
comment. I can't help but agree with what Mark said. He asked a couple of fairly basic questions, and we've been unable to get answered, and we don't blame you, believe me. You didn't draw this up, and you're their representative, so. I don't think it's going to affect the outcome, but it certainly affects the process. And if they're to come before this board in a process thing, then we should be entitled and to have any answers to questions we have. And we're not being given the answers again. And like Mark said, I imagine this is another item that's going to have to be stamped off pretty quick to get it out of here. And I'm sure it'll pass tonight, because even if I, Mark, go, it'll be a 3-2 vote. But I feel strongly, as he does, that when we ask, we should be able to get an answer. And the information doesn't link together properly. It doesn't, what you said is a little bit different from what we're seeing here. You know, like Mark couldn't connect the dots. I can't connect the dots on it either, on the purpose for it. You know, why is it being put in?
Okay. Marie, you want to?
I think it would have made more sense to have Eversource and Verizon here at the same time, because I think a lot of the information we got at the last hearing makes it a little clearer for me in hearing the partial information you're able to give us, because we had the Verizon hearing before, and I remember us talking about the existing poles in front of the town. In fact, I had talked about whether we should put them underground, and then that very next day, there was an accident in front of our building, and the pole was hit. So, but I think I understand why you're putting the new pole across, because you can't do the guide wire where the other is. So when I look at the information I got from Verizon, from you here, and then combine it with what I heard from Eversource, I feel like I do have a complete picture, but I think it would be clearer if we had been able to hold the hearings together, so we could really see, since you're talking about the same poles that we were just talking about a couple of weeks ago. So that's my comment, but I'll be voting to support it.
Okay. Any other? Yes.
There are two issues that our town engineer brought up. The first is, in his memo, he set conditions that I think, if we do in fact approve this or vote on it, it ought to be subject to the conditions set forth by our town engineer, Paul. Just for your benefit, I think they're fairly straightforward, and they're not necessarily unusual things like road opening and trench permits required, and trees protected during construction, contaminated soils removed at the expense of the applicant if they occur, and disturbed areas restored to original or better condition. I mean, those are his conditions, so nothing particular, but we need to include those. The other comment, though, he had was that at the last Verizon petition, there was a discussion about, on Long Meadow Street, the removal of a dead tree, and Verizon still hasn't done that. And Paul, you don't work for Verizon, you work for UC Synergetic, and I don't know how we make this contingent upon Verizon complying with our prior requirements, but I think we need to do that.
Okay.
Yeah, well, that's definitely Andy's recommendation. Is that tree that we know about, Stephen?
I believe so.
Yeah.
About half down.
They've talked about it.
Down, yeah.
Half down.
But 2 years ago, they put the stakes in with the flags,
Well,
and
this is
They
October
have a pole in now.
2016.
yeah, they have a pole. They have a pole in, right?
Yeah, they finally got
But
a
the guide
pole.
wire still connected to the tree.
Yeah, it's been, it's been going on for 4 years now.
Yeah, easily.
Mhm.
My
Well,
only concern with that is that
The guide wire is no longer to the tree. It's
Oh.
been guide off on the new pole.
mhm.
is delaying the start of the project.
Mhm.
That's my only concern.
Well,
Right.
how long does it take for them to go out and do that job?
4 years.
No, I mean, if we make it conditional, that this is approved.
When you make it
conditional on the-
conditional, it means they can't move their poles until they do it, and if past is prologue, then they may just sit on it, and then we're the ones through delay schedule. Again, if this wasn't our project,
Right.
yeah, absolutely. But we're the ones that are gonna own any delays and issues with the contractor.
Do we have the authority to fine Verizon
It depends on what.
for not
Bylaws.
complying with the conditions of their job petition back in October 2016?
I don't know, maybe. It's probably a question for the DPU, isn't this all regulated by DPU?
Or if
We
we set
granted the
up a
petition.
bylaw.
We granted the petition, subject to conditions, and very honestly, they didn't meet those conditions. What makes us think they're going to meet these conditions?
Right.
And what compels them to meet these conditions necessarily? I mean, it's kind of a, we'll do what we want to when we want to, and if you need it badly enough, you'll let us get away with it.
Yeah.
I mean, I'd rather call Verizon in here and let them answer to
Do
it.
they need our permits to be able to put stuff on the poles? That's just all Eversource? They
Or
just need-
Verizon, depends on who owns the poles.
Yeah.
But now Paul's figuring out why he got sent instead of somebody from Verizon.
And now you know why.
I would send you Al Bissett, the right-of-way agent. He's the legal mind behind this stuff to answer your legal questions. I know nothing about what you're talking about.
Nor do we anticipate that you
So
would.
if you want to talk to somebody from Verizon, you would talk to Al Bissett.
I think this is a one-day thing. They could bring in a truck, take down that big tree stump, there's no branches left,
No,
grind it,
big stump.
and I bet you if we held this off for 2 weeks, they'd be willing to do that before the
But I
end
don't
of the
know if we
week.
can do that, because the project needs it done. These always come in front of us having to be done yesterday.
Yeah.
So the only thing is maybe a letter from the chair saying that's the last permit that will ever be going through this board if that tree's not taken care of.
We could do that. Would
Because
that-
how, I mean, they're now, I know there's a lot that they want to do in town, or we could also just start looking at increasing property tax on.
No, not increase the property tax, but like anything else, there's a directive from the select board to do something, they're not doing it, we ought to attach their real property. Put an
could.
attachment on their real property,
Well,
that
we
they
could
don't,
just-
they own a
we could
nice big
send-
building on Long Meadow
Send
Street.
Northern out, take the tree down, and then send them, and then attach it to.
Well, maybe we do that. Put an attachment on their property.
You can send them a bill, but
They won't pay it.
Well,
They may or not.
we could put a lien, and then they'd
We
never...
put a lien on their
they're never
building.
gonna sell the
They own a
property.
building on Long Meadow Street.
Yeah, but it has to be related to that building.
Well, why don't we start with a stern letter from the chair?
Okay. I'd be willing to do that, hopefully that would
Yeah, not on
help.
our $2.5 million project.
But they don't have any,
Well,
they don't have
so...
a dog in the fight in most
So
of these
one
petitions.
thing would be a
Do it
letter
because somebody
from
else
the
wants
chair, which I would be willing to do. And the second thing would, we could ask the town manager to look in to see if we could, if there could be some fine, I guess. Can we fine, right? Because at this point, you think you'd have to look at that a little bit more, Stephen? Or do you have a definitive answer?
I do not have a definitive answer, but I have a hunch.
You have a hunch that we can't.
So when a petition is granted with a contingency, and the contingency isn't met, that means that whatever they did in violation of the petition. So what's the remedy for somebody acting in violation of their petition? That's the
We might need to
question.
create a bylaw to make that happen.
No, I don't need to create a bylaw. If they're operating in violation of a petition, the conditions of the petition were they cut down the tree. They didn't do it.
Well, let's see what
So-
our
so-
town attorney says.
What is this? They get to pick and choose what they want to do and what they don't want to do. They're flaunting the law. Don't come back in
I'll look
here.
into the question whether or not they can be cited or fined or assessed if they did fail to do it, or what the significance of if they failed to meet a condition.
Thank you.
Okay, so we'll plan on doing both of those things. And so then, for this project, it is important to, sort of the investment we've made in this, improvement district. Do we have a motion? Yeah,
I move to approve the two petitions, conditional on the three,
Four.
it's four? Oh, yeah, 4 conditions recommended by the town attorney. Do I have to read those?
No, it's town engineer.
Town engineer. Do those need to be read, Debbie?
No.
Well, the road, you've got that. It's number 1, road opening and trench permit.
She's got it.
okay.
You got it,
yeah,
okay.
Yeah, I can make sure they're in the minutes.
Okay.
Okay, and we have a
Well,
second?
I'm going to second that motion with the following comment, that because I don't want to slow this project down, it's too important, but in solidarity with these two guys, it's the last one that I'm going to approve without better information.
Mhm. Yeah, I think I agree with you, as far as solidarity, to say that you know, especially this tree thing needs to be resolved as soon as possible. It's just a one-day process, so they could take care of that. Hopefully they will.
It should have been taken care of the day they put the pole in. Bingo.
Yes, sure.
One crew, get it done.
Yeah.
And I guess, not at the risk of piling on to Paul here, I mean, I think as a sub, you have an agreement with Verizon to be here on their behalf. I don't believe we're the ones that should be calling Al Bissett,
No, I will be talking to Al Bissett tomorrow myself.
and he should be calling us.
I can have him do that. I'll relay the message.
Thank you. Thank you.
Okay, well, thank you. So we call for a vote. All those in favor? Those opposed? All right, they made the cut this time. Can't say about the next time, but,
Message sent, message received, and I will relay that message.
okay, thank you
All right,
Thanks,
thank
Paul.
you.
for your time tonight.
And Tom, could you put that on, mark in May, mid-May, that in 1 month we take a look and see what really happened with that tree gets reported?
Yep. All right, I'll do that. And then we can go back to resident comments. Well, the hearing's closed, the voting's done. And just give us your name and your address, please.
Thanks.
Andrew Fox, 29 Lorenz Street. I spoke at this point of your last meeting as well, and unfortunately was afforded no response or dialogue from the board. Yet an hour or so later, viewed your discussion of the topic, including some disparaging comments from Town Manager Crane. Tonight, I wish to comment again on the misguided town meeting article that attempts to remove a current bylaw that protects the quality of life in our town, and also on the failure of Building Commissioner Healy and Town Manager Crane to properly enforce many of the other bylaws as well. Additionally, I would like to know from this board how a resident obtains a dialogue with your group on an issue and what recourse the town has for residents to get town officials to properly do their jobs, as I thought it was the select board that ran the town. To Mr. Crane's comment that he doesn't get a lot of complaints, but there are a few people who complain a lot, I would say that if he includes me in that group, I will say that it is actually his own fault because he allows town bylaw violations to go on unchecked and has failed to institute a policy of escalating penalties that might actually solve the problem. If a resident concerns are addressed as they should be, I highly doubt that residents continue to call for no reason. Unfortunately, it is the opposite. Residents are forced to continue to complain due to the inaction of the proper authorities in solving the problem. Residents have every right and unfortunately the need to complain because the problems continue due to the town's lame approach. Residents do not have to continue to live with bylaw violations that are dangerous, unsightly, and drive down property values. This board has the responsibility to direct Mr. Crane and Mr. Healy to enforce them, and then perhaps they won't have to deal with those who have to complain a lot due to their inaction. Mr. Lowe, you are a real estate professional, so you are well aware of what conditions like I showed you last week can do to neighborhood property values. At the last meeting, you astutely mentioned that many of the bylaw violations the pictures showed had nothing to do with the one about commercial vehicles. Although they were all brought there by the commercial vehicle, you are basically correct. But why did you not delve further and find out why those violations continued as well and were not properly addressed by town officials? Ms. Angelides, you picked up on the absurdity of continuing to just warn constant offenders instead of instituting an escalating series of penalties, yet did not go further and direct the town manager to do so. Mr. Foster, you are correct that many commercial vehicles are in fact the same vehicle type as a personal vehicle, but the town bylaws, Mass DOT rules, and Chapter 540 of Mass General Law point out exactly why and how they can be wildly different, and that's the main point. A vehicle with a commercial plate is a commercial vehicle, but so is any vehicle used in conjunction with a business, whether or not it has a commercial plate or not, or writing on it or not. That is because, as I told you last week, it's not just about what the vehicle is, it's about what the vehicle does. If a vehicle is used for both personal and business use, then it is considered a commercial vehicle. Commercial always takes precedent. A pickup truck with a plow that is used to plow for hire is a commercial vehicle, whether they also use it to plow their own driveway or not, and whether it has writing or commercial plates on it or not. Any pickup truck or other truck, if on the bed, roof, or sides, equipment, supplies, or materials are transported to or from a job site, is a commercial vehicle. A vehicle which has business lettering, markings, or advertising on it is a commercial vehicle. These last two are the most important and are quoted from Mass DOT rules and Mass 540 CMR. So although you may have an F-150 just like the commercial guy, you are not likely to have writing on it, or a plow, or a bed filled with construction debris, tools, and gas cans, or pulling a trailer with a bobcat in it, etc. Those are the huge differences, even if the actual vehicle is exactly the same. I have presented to you a list received through a public records request which shows the numerous and recurring violations, many of which continue, and the rest which will likely return with springtime, as they always have when the outdoor work season begins. Some of the following will hopefully help you understand the absurdity of the situation and show why this board needs to step in and make significant changes to how bylaws are enforced. This information was also obtained through a public records request. Currently, one of the two adjoining properties is an unregistered rental property from which the tenants drive over the lawn to exit onto the side street instead of backing out of the driveway. When questioned by the town about driving over the lawn, the response from the violator is, "Years ago, my father petitioned the town for a curb cut onto the side street, and it was denied, so we just drove on the lawn anyway. And now from that unlawful activity, the ground has become impervious, so we can just continue to do it." And that nonsense prompts no response from the town. When questioned by Mr. Healy and the police about the unregistered and/or unregistered vacant abandoned rental property, the violator responds that the 3 or 4 people living there are doing so for free, so it does not constitute a rental. However, the violator refuses to allow Mr. Healy or the police to enter the premises nor speak to any of the tenants. Hardly the actions of an innocent person, but the town just walks away and does nothing. Additionally, the IRS defines rental as any compensation toward taxes, utilities, insurance, or upkeep, exchange of work for room, and many other forms of payment other than the traditional rent. And it's hard to believe that this violator is just some kind of philanthropist who can and is willing to support living expenses for 3 or 4 people. I suspect that this property would not pass inspection with the Board of Health or the Fire Department as a non-owner occupied dwelling. Yet if there was ever a fire or other tragedy there, the town, however, would be quickly sued for its negligence. In a voluntary statement to police, the violator states that there have been complaints about the business that he runs out of his house, leaving commercial motor vehicles parked outside overnight on-street parking, and having heavy equipment parked on site. But the building department has never found him to be in violation of any town bylaw, he tells the police. This clearly shows why the obvious violations continue unchecked, as the town, due to the ridiculous policy of infinite warnings but no citations or fines, fails to send a clear message that there are violations and that they won't be tolerated. In an email to Mr. Healy, the violator writes, "While I may occasionally not toe the line on some of the bylaws, I do not break them." This ridiculous statement received no response from the town and clearly demonstrates that the town's lack of proper process, enforcement, and demonstration of a commitment to those bylaws meant to ensure all residents' quality of life leads to ongoing situations like those in our neighborhood that are dangerous, unsightly, and drive down property values. Again, for the sake of all residents, I ask that you direct town employees to begin to properly enforce all existing bylaws. Thank you.
I'd like to ask a couple of questions. I know we normally don't do it, but this is twice the gentleman's been before the board, and I have a couple of questions I'd like to ask.
Well, he doesn't have to answer them.
Yeah,
but
he
if-
doesn't have to answer, I just-
I'm just gonna check with him.
Okay.
Would you be willing to take some questions from the
Sure.
board, or?
Yeah.
You would? Okay.
Yeah. I guess the question I have, I listened to your explanation, by the way, you classified me as a commercial person, and I'm certainly not.
No, I was just trying
No, I
to
mean,
point
under
out
the
the situation
definition-
that you can have the same truck for personal use that
Yeah,
someone can have.
but
as
under the
commercial.
definitions you describe, in your eyes, I'm a commercial person. Because I
I don't know.
have tools in the back, and I tow stuff through town, I have a tractor, and I'm not a commercial person.
Okay.
Okay, I have, so, but I mean, the question I really have is, what would you propose the town do? Now, just saying enforcing all the bylaws doesn't mean it, because if you, under the definitions you just had for trucks alone, what are we going to, force these people out of town, have them sell their equipment? I mean, I don't understand.
Well, the bylaw says that they need to garage their equipment. That's all
Okay.
it says.
But under the definition
I didn't
of-
write the bylaw.
But I'm just saying, in practicality of the year we're in now, what would you propose that the town do? On a, say, a 3/4 ton pickup, would you propose that we go to each owner and say, you have to build a larger garage to put that vehicle in, or sell your home and move out?
If that's what the bylaw states. I know Mr. Pelletier right across the street, when he moved into town, he had a truck, he built himself a garage and he puts it in there. Mr. Crane mentioned that Mr. LaPlante lives next to him and he puts his truck in a garage. So these bylaws were created to establish a quality of life that the people in this community wanted. And so I don't see how it's some one or two individuals' decisions now to say, oh, they're outdated, we don't want them anymore.
Yeah, I don't think that's what's being done. I ride through the town like you do. And I see people that, by profession, have a vehicle that they drive back and forth to work that's got a commercial tag on it. Are we to ban them from living in our community?
No, the bylaw says they just need to put them in a garage.
Okay, but then we're going to force them to build a garage. Is that my
I
understanding?
assume most people have garages?
Well, I assume most people do, and they're packed tight like everybody else's garage. But I mean, I think my thing is, are you wanting the town to move forward in that aggressive type stance that we're going to start issuing citations to every homeowner that's got a vehicle outside and say, as of 6 months from now, we'll file formal action against to evict you from our community if you don't have a garage built to house that vehicle?
Or the vehicle isn't allowed in town? I mean, that's what the bylaw states now. What was the thinking when
Okay,
it
so-
was, what was the thinking when it was written?
So then that is your expression to this board,
Well,
then?
first
That's
of all,
what you feel needs to be
we're only
done?
reactive, so I guess if you're not bothered by it in your neighborhood, then it could stay there.
Ironically, I'm equally bothered as you are,
But Then,
okay?
no,
Let me
so-
set the record straight. I don't like
no,
commercial
I'm not saying you're
vehicles either.
not, but the way it was explained to me by Mr. Healy and Mr. Crane is that the town, in and of itself, if I'm not misquoting them, doesn't really care about any of the bylaws. They're not proactive. So Mr. Healy sees
Well, I don't
a
want to
truck.
divert off on that. That's a circle. I want to stay right with the question I asked. Because I think if you were listening last week, you also heard me say, I lived in a community where vehicles of this
Could be
nature were
parked at
prohibited, but that community had a private parking
Right.
area where they could put the vehicles.
Correct,
Up here, we don't even have land big enough to build another U-totem,
right.
leave alone have a commercial parking lot to park these vehicles. And
Right.
I look to this community like you do,
Right.
and I see a lot of, quote, commercial vehicles. And I don't know the answer, but I can't imagine the answer is forcing everybody to build a garage, because it's not going to work.
Well, I don't
We'd
think
be in
the answer is
litigation from
build a
now to
garage
doomsday.
either. I believe that most garages will fit these trucks, and I guess my bigger concern is I showed you pictures that show what happens when this is allowed. So maybe if it was only the truck, people would be less concerned, even though it is still a bylaw. So change the bylaws as you see fit, or the town people see fit, but also start to enforce the other ones. So the truck is the least of what you saw in those pictures.
No, I agree.
And as Mr. Lowe pointed out, but still nothing got done.
All right.
So I'd like my neighborhood to look like I assume what your neighborhood looks like.
Yeah, I'm not so
I
sure.
haven't been there, but, or the way I guess we expect our neighborhood.
Yeah, what we expect, the expectations is
And
it.
I'm doubtful that your neighborhood looks like those pictures.
All right, well, it will be coming before the town on May 8th.
But I think there is a different issue here, a larger issue, that, and I also don't want to get the focus off on the one, because as Mr. Lowe pointed out, and I just said, there are a lot more bylaw violations there than the one truck.
Yeah,
But the town doesn't seem to take ownership of those and enforce them.
okay, all right, well, thank you, yes.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Fox. I'd like to, I don't know if it's correction or redefine one of the things you said, and I think.
Okay, well, let me just, before, is it okay if Mr. Gold asks you some questions?
Absolutely.
Okay.
I mean, one of the perceptions I have is that our bylaw enforcement is often by reaction and not by initiative.
Correct.
And I think that's what you may have heard, as opposed to we don't care about bylaws.
Correct.
We care about bylaws, but our bylaw enforcement is often by reaction. So if somebody complains, we'll respond. And I
Correct.
guess the
But
question.
even the reaction doesn't seem to be very, it's
Well,
like.
I think the question for this
they're bothered by
board
it.
is that appropriate? And at what level should that reaction be? And how should we direct both the town employees to enforce bylaws? And to some degree, it does fall to the select board, I think, to direct the town manager, if in fact we want to continue to enforce bylaws by reaction. We will end up with a slippery slope, because there's some neighborhoods where people don't care and they're not complaining, and so they've got more and more legal bylaw violations occurring, and there are other neighborhoods where they do care, and the same thing that is not being addressed in one neighborhood, residents of another neighborhood may be asking the town to address, and it becomes very difficult to enforce things on the north side of town and not on the south side of town, or vice versa. And I think that's where we fall into an issue. And I don't think that, we've got the right to decide where we enforce our bylaws and where we don't. We either enforce them or we change them. And until they're changed, in my opinion, they need to be enforced. And we're now at a situation where more and more people, as Mr. Foster indicated, have trucks, commercial trucks in their yards, because it wasn't being enforced for years. But when the first truck showed up in somebody's driveway and they're told, look, you either garage it or you move it out of town, there wouldn't have been a second one show up in somebody else in that town. But it's proliferated because of the lack of enforcement, of primary enforcement by the town, and I think that's part of the problem. I think we ought to-
Proactive enforcement.
Proactive
Yeah,
enforcement. I
proactive
think we need to address whether or not we want to have proactive enforcement.
Right, well, I guess, I know the town manager wants to say something, but before that, I would say that the most effective proactive enforcement is really by neighbors, talking to each other and saying, this is a situation that's, out of control, and what can you do about it? And hopefully, the neighbors can cooperate with each other. I don't see that you're getting that kind of satisfaction. But I know throughout the town, people aren't always happy with their neighbors, but, they try to do, the goal is for neighbors to solve it themselves. The reason we have bylaws is because it reached a point where a neighbor can't find satisfaction, and that's unfortunate. I don't know, Stephen, did you want to say anything else at this point? Or?
Bylaws are for uniformity, Tom.
Yeah,
If we left it up to each set of citizens, we don't know what standards we would have, because we might agree that we can put a crane in our front yard, because we have to use the crane on the weekend. So I don't want to start an argument, but there is a reason for bylaws.
yeah,
And there's a reason for code compliance, and it's not just, the problem is we basically have let it go down to the point of citizen to citizen by not having a proactive enforcement program. And we've talked to the town manager before on proactive enforcement.
yeah. Well, the first laws from Hamilberry, I guess, Middle East, were about property law. People complaining about property, what should happen on their property, and who should get what. And so we've had laws a long time, as Marie knows. Yeah.
I just think asking questions would be one thing, but we're starting to deliberate on actions, and I think it has to be part of the agenda.
To do that.
To ask someone has to ask for it to be on the agenda for us to really take this much farther.
Right. And Mr. Fox had a good question about, you know, at what point would residents be allowed to have a discussion with the select board over issues that present themselves? And that only happens, you know, when there's an open hearing, right? That's the
Or
only
when
time.
it's on the agenda, or else if we have a forum or something like that.
But we have things on the agenda and people aren't able to.
Yeah, but
make
this is the
comments
exception
unless
to the
they're-
rule that we've opened the dialogue.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, and
know.
I asked for permission to open the
Yeah.
dialogue tonight.
Right.
Just because we hadn't had the opportunity for any interaction whatsoever. But Marie just said it's a forum, or it's an open communique, it's put on the agenda.
Yeah.
That's the
Which I
only-
think was, you know, pardon me for interrupting, but I believe that was part of the bylaw task force problem. The fact that this group met in private and there was no public meetings, and so here we have a situation where there is a problem. There's no way for a resident to have a dialogue with this group. There was no way for a resident to have a dialogue with the bylaw task force. I mean, I thought our form of government was by the people, but
Right.
only a few of them, I guess.
Because the other place that a resident would take something like this would be the zoning meetings, right? Is that where it would be? It wouldn't be a zoning issue?
Well, that's one of the process, so if there's and that's the other thing that I've found, is that there is no communication from the building commissioner back to the person who raises the issue, because there is a process of which you're, as a complainant, you're supposed to be notified in writing by the building commissioner, and if you're, quote, aggrieved by that decision, whether you're the violator or the complainant, you then have the ability to go to the ZBA, but none of that occurs.
Okay.
Thank you for your time.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you for coming in and entertaining our questions. All right, so we,
That's not right.
is there any other comments?
I can wait till town manager's report, but I'll definitely comment.
Well, we
That's
could-
coming up now.
Coming up. You're on.
Okay.
Well, select
Well, resident
comments.
comments, we do go to select board comments. Marie?
Yes, the tax ceiling task force has requested 4 applications for residents, or if there's 4 placements, so we're still collecting applications if anyone's interested. I think we have a couple, there still might be some more seats. We'll discuss the process later, but I just wanted to make sure at the beginning of the meeting, people know they can still put in their applications to be part of it.
Okay, thank you. Any other select board comments? No? I would just like to make a comment on, you know, the question about appointment to people to voter registration board. And, you know, I have gotten some additional information to look at the kind of appointments we've made over the last 20 years and get some perspective. So maybe we could put that on a future agenda and discuss a little further and make sure that we're on track with that. And as I said before, I had the town manager getting a legal opinion from our town council, so we can make sure that we are fair to both political groups, and it sounds like we've kind of moved around a little bit, but, you know, we'll see. That's all I have. Any other select board comments? Okay, I guess we move on to the town manager reports.
So briefly, we have interviews this week for the for the executive director for Westcom, which is kind of an exciting milestone. We have 4 candidates. The service chiefs will be interviewing the 4 candidates as kind of a first round, and then one or more of those 4 candidates will be forwarded to the board of directors, who will do the final interviews. Hopefully, we get somebody appointed by the end of April. The next round of grant cycles, or the next grant cycle guidelines have come out, and I think it's good they're well written for the spot that we're in for the regional dispatch, and we'll be ready to, it'll advance us greatly towards our goal of, as we said, go live, switch over for July 1st, 2019, which remains the target.
Stephen, is there a point where we would you could tell us about some of the type of equipment that this would have that would be different than what we have now? I mean, because that might be helpful for people to know in terms of, I don't know if there's any, because there'll be some big purchases in the future that.
I'm looking in the fire chief's direction because he's
Yeah.
been, the fire chief and police chief have been intimately involved in the technology side of this. I am not. I do not have the intellectual capacity for dealing with it. But it is exceptionally complex. In fact, I will say that
Yeah.
we are waiting on a set of documents from our vendor, our consultant, who's helping us design all of that.
Yeah.
Which includes coverage maps, and they have like a diagram essentially of the system. And we can certainly present that. I don't think it's completed. I think we're still waiting on it. Yeah, so we're waiting on a diagram of the technology.
Okay, because I'd like to see if we could do that at some point in the future as we continue to move along this path, because I think it's helpful for people to know just how we're going to have access to information and be able to dispatch in a more effective way that we wouldn't be able to afford if we tried to do it our own way.
Well, not on July 1st, 2019. But I will say that we will be set up to handle, they call it Next Gen
Next year.
911, and that's being able to take text messages as an emergency call or photos. Somebody sees something, they submit the photo and video, or a photo or a video along with the dispatch. We're not there yet. I don't even think the state police is there yet, but that is the Next Gen. They call it, there's a program out there, Next Gen
Yeah.
911.
So it would be
For
nice-
us,
it would be nice to, like, how much that kind of equipment costs and how we're going to have access.
I
Do they
don't know that we're there yet. I don't think
Okay.
anybody's at Next Gen yet.
All right.
When is that going to come back for final approval? We're still in exploratory.
We signed the district agreement. The board voted to approve the district agreement.
Whoa, wait a
No,
second.
no, no.
We were told, and I'll get the tape, we were told that didn't make a comment, that didn't make a commitment, and I think Richard's right.
Right.
We were
Right.
flat out
Yeah.
told that, and if that's different, Stephen.
Well, we can vote to withdraw from the district agreement.
No, we were told that didn't finalize the decision. We were told we still had to vote to accept
Right,
it.
right.
That's why he's asking the question. I felt the same thing.
When we discussed it,
Let's get the tape.
right, get the tape, it was,
Yeah.
It's not what we were told.
so like I'll give you the example, Hamden and East Long Meadow voted to approve and sign the district agreement like we did.
Mhm.
They then voted to get out of the district, which remains an option for us.
Yeah, well, I have a misunderstanding too, so I think we'll review the tape.
Marie?
My understanding was that once we got to the next level of funding, you'd be coming back to us, and we'd have to approve the next level. But what I would be interested in is the ad that went out to the regional director, if we could see a copy of that ad, so we sort of have an idea of what's going each step.
And-
Sure.
And at this point, the town hasn't made any financial commitment to this, and that would be something that would come around at budget time, I guess, is that where that would
We
show
don't,
up?
we don't have
No?
any financial commitment to it, and I
Yeah.
don't anticipate that we will. I think,
Okay,
as I've been saying all the way along, I think we will get a financial benefit from it.
okay. So,
But there is a commitment.
Well,
But-
and what do you mean?
but not a dollar.
This town is
commitment.
going to be contributing to the operation of that facility.
We will contribute an assessment to the district.
Right,
But the overall cost of the district is going to be written down 75% by the state.
but still, there is a commitment.
It's less than what we.
It's less than what we
Yeah,
currently
okay,
spend
well,
now.
A lot more to follow. Okay, but you made it sound like there was no commitment whatsoever for our community in your statement you just made, and that's not true.
Well, not for this budget season, right?
No, not for the-
FY '19.
Yeah,
Okay.
until we switch over and are paying an assessment to the district, there's no commitment in the town. We are committed to dispatch in the amount of money we spend on dispatchers' equipment, so on and so forth.
Mhm.
But when we switch over, we'll have a commitment to the district, but that commitment will be significantly less than we're committing to dispatch right now.
Tom, who's on the interview panel for the regional director?
The service chiefs.
The service chiefs are doing it. And what about the mayor and you?
It would be me, the second round would be me and either the mayor or the mayor's chief of staff, who's his designee to the board of
But it
directors.
first was vetted through the chiefs, the
Yeah.
resumes. And what are these people, usually former chiefs, or what are we looking for?
A different mix. Some of them are people working in dispatch centers now who are looking for advancement. Some of them are, a lot of the current dispatchers. I forget the list. We had 7 applicants, and the 4 of them, I do think all have either dispatch or public safety experience.
Maria, in that question, were you thinking that this board should have any
No, I
involvement?
just think we should understand where we are in the process, who's getting involved in the process, because I'm always feeling we need to keep eyes on whenever we make commitment to a third-party entity, whether it's the collaborative the schools have, or we have Scantic Valley or the pension board, we have to find some way to really keep an eye on how that process is growing and building. So that's all. I just want to hear how we are going step by step.
Good, thank you.
Okay. I feel like I've been reporting step by step.
He's asking why we're asking further questions.
Okay.
Because I wanted to understand where we were and how we were going through the hiring process.
Okay.
Okay.
So she wants a description of it was a job description, is that what you're looking for?
Yeah, the job description too.
Okay, great. Stephen, next.
So the DPW project, has been gotten through permitting. As you noted, they've gotten all their approvals. They did get site and design approval from the planning board. But that was basically they submitted a site and design review in December because they had to meet the permitting timelines, but we did commit based on, that site plan was approved by the planning board, but the planning board understands that we are gonna be submitting an amendment for approval at the conclusion of bidding, but prior to construction, because the design can, and I think has gotten tweaked based on questions and feedback we've gotten from potential bidders. The bid opening is, I think, Thursday, the 5th. So that'll be, everybody keep their fingers crossed for that day. And I had mentioned the cell tower. I said that they were indicating they were going to put an application in soon. I found out this morning at staff meeting that they had and that the balloon test was scheduled. So that was information I got after I put that note in the packet. I had the
Question?
certificate.
When do we think that's going to be available? When will relief come to people who have trouble with cell service?
I would guess they'd start this year, yeah.
So you think by the end of the summer it'll be done?
I haven't heard a timeline from them. The vendor goes incommunicado for quite a while, I think, while they work on leases and things like that. And then it's a lot of communication that goes quiet again. So as soon as I hear a date, I'll let the board know when we break ground.
Okay.
Also in your packet was the list of FY 2018 capital projects. And I apologize that it had to be requested. Normally, we had gotten in the habit of doing this every year and just kind of fell off on updating it and giving it to the board. I know DPW updated it, but it just kind of fell off in the reporting. But it's got all the projects we're working on there, color coded, and that you have guardrail, crack seal, sidewalks, and resurfacing on the roads, and then you've got the call-outs for the individual projects like the boilers, the community house wall, and things like that. So it gives a snapshot of the work we have going this fiscal year.
Steve, is there any chance of putting that on the website if it isn't already on the
Sure.
DPW, so
Yeah, sure.
people in town can see that?
Yeah.
Thanks.
And you'll
It's a
have it
great
for
map. I
town.
think it's, a
Thank you.
picture's worth 1,000 words.
And you'll have it on town meeting, on a board, we talked about that, right?
I think for town meeting, we usually put information out about requested projects.
Oh, I think it'd be nice for them to see what's
Sure.
happening
Yeah,
this
you
year.
can do that too.
And then you'd have it for your Long Meadow Days booth. You're still doing one this year, right?
It depends.
You'll get it.
Well, they're doing
Yeah,
one.
you
We'll see.
always will.
Yeah. No, I think honestly, we don't. Well, I think the senior center, to some extent, depends on what happens at town meeting for the senior center. But we'll probably be out there.
Mhm.
The Ministry of Propaganda is what I was calling it.
Yeah, well, they enjoyed, people enjoyed stopping and speaking.
No, it was good. I got a lot of feedback. Not all of it positive all the time, but I get feedback about, mostly it was about the DPW, but you interface with the community and people will share what their concerns are, things they like, and most of the feedback was positive.
And bylaw recommendations. I'm sure you'll get a few of those this year, too.
Yes. Are you going to be there? Is that,
No, I have
is
no
that
idea.
am I forewarned that you're going to be stopping by and dropping bylaw?
I have no idea what I'm going to be
Right.
doing the third week in May.
And we also, the Complete Streets, I saw a photo with the.
Oh, the Complete Streets, great. You know, it's, we got a certificate of funding. We had already gotten the grant, and the grant document awards, I think I'd already reported on it several weeks ago. Does Deb will tell you, they had an event a week ago Friday in Winthrop, Mass, which is really kind of an exceptionally difficult place to get to from here. And I had thought it's just going to be kind of a surface thing. I'm not, kind of busy, don't want to take the time to drive all the way out there. And then they called and said, please send somebody. There was actually a lot of grantees from Western Mass. Not many of them made the trip. But it was nice that the Lieutenant Governor and the Commissioner of Highways or the Highway Administrator and the Secretary of Transportation all made pretty nice remarks. Winthrop is the home of House Speaker Robert DeLeo, whose town also coincidentally received a grant.
Shocking.
Yeah, amazing. And then they talked about all the other grants they'd gotten as a part of that, so that was interesting. But it was nice to get the recognition for the town, and I think this was kind of the first round of large Complete Streets grants they've given out, so it's nice that we are kind of on the front end. I know that we were one of the early adopters of the Complete Streets bylaw, so that's something that the town should feel good about. The other thing is, and this may be privileged communication, subject for executive session, but it's in the packet, but I did put the information in there about legal expenses. We had talked about that at the budget, and I think we had a conversation about whether or not we should adjust it, and we said, it's really kind of tied to unique specific things that aren't, it doesn't really reflect an upward trend in kind of regular day-to-day spending. It's something happens in a given year that's unique, and it drives up the cost, and I think the expense sheet, the detailed expenses show that it really is related to a couple of new things that we think will be hopefully resolved this fiscal year.
Do we have an executive session? We don't have one tonight, do we?
No,
Yeah.
no. I think it's the NCAA finals tonight.
Yeah, I'd recommend that we put this on the meeting next time and do have an executive session. I have a couple of questions.
Okay.
Do you want to just
No.
give me a call? It's probably better that way.
I might, Stephen,
Yeah, and we can start talking about an executive session, but if it's one-off questions or you want to have the lawyer present, it's helpful to know what
No
information you
need for a
want.
lawyer present. It's more just a future-looking question on this.
Okay.
So, and I guess I just want to comment on the resident comments, and since we engaged in a colloquy about it, I think, bylaws aren't black and white. And I think sometimes we start talking about bylaws, it takes on a binary flavor. Enforce them all, don't enforce any. This is what the bylaw says, this should be easy. Well, the reality is, it's gray. And sometimes bylaws are subject to interpretation of people in the enforcement role. And that is, quite frankly, not the elected official role. That is Paul Healy is a certified building inspector certified by the state. So his role in enforcement is his role. In fact, as town manager, my role in enforcement is actually quite limited, other than providing support and administrative direction to the people who are responsible for that, whom I trust implicitly, and I think have done an outstanding job since before I got here, and continue to do an outstanding job to this day. I think the idea that we can bylaw our way out of humans not being good neighbors or humans having their homes or vehicles kept the way that we think they should is really an irrational thought. That's really not you really have to take a pretty narrow view of how the world actually works to think that we can adopt bylaws to change people's behavior. And I think when the default mechanism is because one resident, who is the only person on that street that raises these issues, is driving the debate, and the default response may be, maybe we're doing it wrong. I think that not only sends a terrible message to me, but to the departments as well. And I honestly think that you know, I would have liked to have thought that today is my 5th-year anniversary here, April 2nd. And I would have thought that after this time, you know, and really the colloquy that ensued after the comments was almost more troubling than the comments, because I would have liked to have heard from the board, well, you know, the town departments deal with a lot of complaints, and there aren't very many people who come here during resident comments to say that we stink at it. So, you know, yes, we can't make everybody happy, and I think that everybody's been on the select board long enough to know that that's the case when you're in public service. But to suggest that because one person or 2 people are, you know, do not feel like they've been satisfied with their complaints, doesn't mean that we didn't give them the benefit of our time, follow through on it. I mean, he gave it a list of a number of times. Paul Hilly's been out there. We didn't ignore them. And then, Mark, I appreciate your comment. We do care. We take it very seriously. We take every complaint very seriously, even ones that have been made more than one time. But it's not a black and white deal with bylaw enforcement. And if you want to talk about proactive enforcement, then we can talk about it in the context of the FY20 budget, because we would have to add a lot of manpower to be able to do that. And I just don't, first of all, I don't think that the town could afford to do that. And second of all, when we talk about quality of life, people not enjoying a little bit of freedom of enjoyment of their property affects quality of life as well. And knowing that the town is driving around looking for them doing something wrong, it doesn't work that way in many towns that I'm aware of, and I don't think that that's, when people think of the quality of life of Long Meadow, that that's what they envision either. So I just, you know, I do try and hear feedback, even when it's not positive. I do try and take away things when I'm not doing it right. If somebody is not a satisfied customer, I always try and find out, even if I can't make them happy with any answer, what could I do differently to communicate that message better? But I just, you know, like I said, I think that the boards, we do a good job at this. The town departments do a good job at this. And I don't want, and it frustrates me to see the reaction be, well, maybe the board needs to issue directives to have them do better, without really engaging me in a conversation and how I feel as a person who's responsible for the operations, how I feel it's going. And if you don't feel it's going well, then that's what we talk about during my performance evaluation, but not in directives in a given meeting to tell me how to do it better, you know, do one situation better. That's not how this is supposed to be. So I really am troubled by the conversation. I'm sorry Dr. Fox isn't satisfied. To be honest with you, he's the one that said, if you don't want to enforce the bylaw, change it. So I brought you a change. So I'm listening. We're not ignoring the issue, but we think that the way the bylaw is constructed and the way our town is presently constructed, and the people who live here and who now live, work, want to be able to do their job and enjoy their home. And there are a lot of homes where you just simply cannot build a garage. You know, I just think that maybe our bylaws need to be a little bit flexible and reflect the times we're in. Not every bylaw needs to be etched in stone for all time.
Right. And so, yes, I mean, I agree that there are a lot of folks in town who believe the town does a good job with the bylaws. I don't hear people complaining a lot about the way town operates. But I would like to say that it's, you know, not a lot of people like to complain, you know, and sometimes you only will get one person on the street who will really want to stand up and speak out, and it informs the select board of how things are going. You know, I mean, it's valuable for us to hear from folks who are interacting with the town and saying, well, you know, this is an area that you know, I'm not pleased with, and you know, we're like you say, you know, you're responding to it, and I don't think the board's feeling that you're not doing your job, or the people working for you aren't doing their job. But I think it's good to air out these sort of issues, and so I know it's not easy for us to listen to, but I think it's valuable for us to be aware of how it does affect, you know, individuals, because most people won't tell us. I mean, I believe most people will not even come up and tell us. You know, they're too nervous to come up and speak to the board. So, you know, I don't know if any other questions
No,
about that.
I think criticism is part of the job, number one. Number two, criticism helps us do things better. And we always can improve and do things better. And I think one of the things that I've been concerned about for a while, and that is what is the process for people to be able to come forward and having more open dialogue in regards to bylaws. Bylaws has always become an issue with this select board and in town because we have some very old bylaws that don't fit anymore and we're just leaving them there and they need to be reformed. And there needs to be a larger discussion with the whole community. And I think that's why you started the bylaw committee and the board encouraged that to begin. And I think we should look at what is the next rendition of the bylaw committee to get that more active. There was concerns, there was complaints brought before us, and I think actually putting the warrant article on the warrant is going to be allowing a more community-wide discussion on where we are going to go with this bylaw. I'd be surprised if the new bylaw passes this time because it is a big issue and there'll be a lot of discussion about it. But then we'll start to hear from the community on where they really want to be when it comes to commercial vehicles and things like that. So I think I respect and appreciate the fact that residents come up and discussed about an issue that I think is multidimensional on how we deal with our bylaws, how we address them. So discussing how we're going to do that as a town is not criticizing and attacking the employees who are trying to decide when do you enforce and when you don't enforce. But I think it's worth a wider discussion from this board and the community on what we are going to do when we do talk about enforcement. Are we going to talk about more fines? Are we going to pull back and actually do reformation of all of our bylaws? So I think it's a valuable discussion, and I know sometimes it's uncomfortable to all of us. We're told that we weren't doing our job here tonight, but that's all right. It makes us focus and really decide where we're going to go with the bylaw and the bylaw subcommittee or task force. So I don't consider it a personal attack, and I don't hope the employees don't find it as a personal attack. It's looking and saying we've got to readdress the situation and look at it, and it's not just this, it's our bylaws in general. So we could go back and forth and argue on how to address this, but I think the bylaw issue and the subcommittee or town manager task force, I'd like to see it on a future agenda, so we really decide how often do we expect them to meet? Is this select board going to be putting bylaw requests into that committee? Because it's just sort of been limping along with as things come up. But I think it's an important issue for us to discuss.
Can I say something? Marie, I think there's a big difference between saying we can always do better, which you always say, which I agree with, and saying, you know what, we disagree that the town is a lame approach or the town departments are failing. However, we appreciate the feedback and we will try and do better. Only getting the first one. And so when the negativity is driving the discussion, it is offensive. When there is no discussion of all the gains we've made, when one person complains, and maybe you're, and I'll speak only for myself, it does bother me and offend me, and I do take it as criticism when we listen to the board. The bylaw task force didn't even exist, and it only exists because I created to address the bylaw concerns that were raised at the board level, and then I'm not even doing that right. And it's the only thing I heard in that discussion was Howard doing it wrong. It's important, I think, for this board that represents the town, but also the town organization, to stand up and say, we don't actually get a lot of complaints, and it's not because people are afraid to reach out to you. I mean, Mark talks about the emails he gets all the time. People do reach out, not always at resident comments, but people email, they call, they do that. It's just not a broad number of people, okay? Which should be an indicator not of a chilling effect by the select board or the town manager, but a high level of service being provided by the select board and town manager. And I didn't get that message at all in how the board responded to that.
I don't think the board is supposed to respond to comments coming from the residents. That's not what resident comments are for.
Right.
Now, a few questions were asked, but this was not a full discussion on bylaws. So I think we got to bring it down a couple of notches, get it on the agenda, and we go decide where we're going next time. I do not feel there was a major attack that occurred on the town employees tonight. And I think that if we want to have a further discussion, we can in the future. But I think this is really going way off field for something that's not on the agenda.
And I just do hope that you heard Marie's compliment, which, there was a lot she said, but she definitely complimented the fact that, by introducing this bylaw, you're expanding this discussion to a much larger group, which is better for the town. And that is a compliment, and,
And I guess maybe this is not the only time this has happened recently, and maybe I'm just starting to get the sense that it's important. I think I've already communicated this. Town employees watch these meetings too, and when the first response is, "Yeah, you're right, we can do better," versus, we do a pretty good job, but where are the specific ways where we could, it's important to say that out loud. And you don't have to listen to me, that's fine. And if you didn't hear a criticism of town employees, you weren't listening to the same remarks that I heard.
This is sort of sounding like fake news to me. I mean, you're introducing scenarios, hoping somebody will pick up.
That's the most offensive thing that's
now,
been
wait
said
a
so
minute.
far, Richard.
I got the table now. I've listened to you. But basically what you're doing is like putting out a fake news story, because no one at this table said anything about any employees, didn't say anything about the town manager's performance. They strictly asked this gentleman some specific questions for further understanding what he's saying, and you took off thinking this is offensive. I think you need to reevaluate your own views on the discussion on this board. I'd be the first to tell you and agree with you that, yeah, we were attacking you, but that wasn't it. You think you're being attacked.
Can I say something? I was being attacked, but not by the board. And my whole point is, if my response and how personally I take this and how serious I take this is fake to you.
You're insinuating that this board did something wrong, Stephen.
I'm not insinuating. What I'm stating, Richard, is that I was attacked. My performance in the resident comments was attacked. The performance of other town employees was attacked.
Right.
And that attack was essentially left unchecked, and it really honestly isn't really all that accurate. Other than Mark, thank you for saying that we do care, which we do. But the response was, well, maybe we need to tell the town manager how to do it differently. Maybe we need to do this. Not once was there I said the discussion really could have been led with, well, compared to the whole town, how does the level of complaints, where is the level of complaints compared to the whole town? Because I'll tell you, like I told you, it's a small number.
Well,
And
Stephen,
I just find recently the debate's getting driven by a small number of people who are just upset about what they're upset about without it, and then it's, so now we're going to react to that versus,
I think
okay, where does this fit in the grand scheme of things?
You're reading way too much into this, Stephen. I'm sorry.
Okay.
You have gone ballistic on something that's a much lower issue, because every member of this board was addressed in visitor comments tonight, not in an enlightening and praising fashion.
Okay.
Okay? We didn't get all upset about this. This is part of being a public official, is to take the good, the bad, and the ugly, process it, come back and modify procedures if we need, or cast aside and say, no, this is one disgruntled individual. But that's what we do as a member, and that's what you do as a town manager with your staff. But to jump up and beat a drum every time somebody says something like they've been attacking you back to childhood is a little bit over the top. It's not needed. I don't think it's personally needed. I think you start to cast a doubt out there within the workforce that there's something else going on behind the scenes, which there is not. That's what I gathered from these comments. Because you said, well, our employees watch these meetings. I don't care if the employees watch these meetings. This is the workings of the town. These problems come to this board. We look for resolution. We look to you for resolution and to your staff. But it's not all smiles and clean talk.
I think I know that, Richard.
Okay, well then demonstrate that a little bit more. It's not, I don't have to try to prove that I'm a good select board member to ward off a negative comment. I know myself what I've done. I don't expect people to tell me every day everything that I've done that's good. I don't have that need. I understand when I do right, and I understand when I do wrong. Do I think we could make some improvements in the town on code compliance? You've heard me express it before to you. Yes, I think we could. You say our police force doesn't wait for me to tell them, hey, I was speeding. They do selective enforcement, they do proactive enforcement. I'd like to see more proactive code enforcement. I think as a member of the community, I expect the community to be out looking at that type of stuff in advance of me, but I expect there to be more sensitivity on their part because they understand the long-range implications of degradation of neighborhoods and these type of issues. They can see a trend starting long before I would as a normal citizen. That's my personal feelings. And that's how I've always found. Now, that's not a negative thing against you or the town. It's just saying I would like to see proactive behavior because I think it can be beneficial. Some of what Mark said is target on. You know, you and I can go out tomorrow, Stephen, and I'll bet you we can find 100 commercial vehicles parked in our community in a very short trip with big banners and everything else on them. So it's there. It depends on what we're going to do about it and at what level it hits on the level of importance. Is there degradation of one vehicle sitting with a commercial tag? Personally, I don't think so, but for some of the pictures that we saw in here, that was degradation of property values. As far as I'm concerned, Mr. Lowe said the same thing. He said, these are the factors that affect property values. And I think that's where we do stand up and have to show management. And sometimes it's not clean. But we all share the same goal. I know that for a fact. I personally know you very well. We all share that same goal. It's just how do we get there as a team?
Yeah, well, and I think that what you're looking for isn't the kind of thing that would generally come out of resident comments from there's other folks who have a lot more experience on the board, but if every time we have residents make comments and then we sort of defended the town and the way we did things, I mean, people would just think, well, why even go? They're just going to be defensive. And so we generally hear the complaints and don't comment on them one way or the other until we have it on an agenda item. So, I think that's the hard part is that we're not always in a position where we can sort of defend the town because then people would kind of think that's
We
what we
didn't
do.
the first time.
Yeah,
The first time we didn't. And that's appropriate. And we made an exception in this case.
yeah.
And that's, once you make the exception,
Mhm.
it's, you know,
All right. Now, do we have any other comments about the select board comments or any other questions for Stephen?
What about the town manager report?
Town manager report, yes.
No, I don't think so.
I know there was something about the complete streets with the lieutenant governor giving, recognition to the town. And, I do think there were some folks on the board who may have wanted to know about that. I know I would have liked to know, and I think Marie, who has, sort of promoted the whole complete streets, may have
I
wanted
thought I
to
had
be
forwarded the
there.
email when I got the original invitation to the entire board.
I don't remember seeing it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't know if we understood that the lieutenant governor was going to be giving out something to the
Again,
town, and so I guess
didn't intend to
that's...
go until we got called on Thursday to go.
So,
But I thought either
Oh,
the
it was
entire board
until
got it, or I
Thursday,
thought I
yeah.
had forwarded
yeah,
the invite to the entire board.
well, I just think that anything involving the governor, the lieutenant governor, even if it's a last-minute thing, I think we should know, people should know. I just want everybody to say that.
Yeah, I'd like to see the chair to be able to attend something like that in the future.
I have one question. Stephen, I don't think you'll have the answer for it. On the DPW map, the work they outlined, for the sidewalk replacement, up on Converse Street, was that part of the federal highways funding?
Yeah.
Okay, so the other work is for us? It doesn't look like a tremendous amount of work unless there's something really bad going on. Because I think we got $400,000 in our account every year. And if I dropped the Converse section off, then it looks like we've got,
$100 a foot.
yeah, it's $45 a lineal foot for the thing. Wimbledon Drive, is it? We're going to do the spot repairs on Bel Air and all.
Those were already done.
This
Wimbledon
saved
and
us.
Avondale were done last year.
Okay, well, it says it's in 2018.
They may have been
18,
done in the
18.
fall. They were done in the fall.
They were done in the fall, right, FY '18, right.
Okay, so this does not reflect the money that we're going to approve at town meeting?
This is the current year.
Yeah, this is last year's money.
Money approved May 2017.
Yeah, okay.
The other thing is, and I forgot to mention Converse Street, as you mentioned, the sidewalks there are part of the TIP project, the state DOT project, so it's DOT's contract, their contractor. Well, the sidewalks are crumbling.
No, I understand, but I was just wondering whether we're paying for it as a
Not
part of the
crumbling,
tip.
delaminating, and we don't know why. I mean, I think the suspicion is salt, but
Yeah.
our belief is that one winter of salt shouldn't do that to a sidewalk.
Yeah, if it's fresh concrete,
Yeah,
it
that's
can.
cured, that's the
Yeah.
problem.
Huh?
Yeah, so we're
Yeah.
working with the state, or we're kind of riding along while the state figures out what they're gonna do with their contract. I would suspect it was a warranty issue, but
Yeah.
that's, the resolution of that is to be determined.
They're going to, if that's brand-new sidewalks, first year, if you put salt on them, they will delaminate.
Oh, they will?
Yeah.
Because it looks like,
Yeah,
you can see where
Concrete
it
needs at
falls
least
down.
a full year cure period.
If you're,
Was that because we rushed the project?
No, it's because we got salt. I would assume the salt got up on them from the road on fresh concrete. The first year is a very crucial period on concrete cure.
so how do they protect sidewalks?
Don't put salt on them.
No, but there's salt on the roads and people drive across the sidewalk.
I
That's the problem.
just say it's salt
Yeah.
on fresh.
So can they repair that?
No, not really. It's
I mean, it was,
delaminated. I mean, you can skim it, but it's going to fail again.
Yeah, I mean, no one,
The second-
the thing that frustrates me is, I'm guessing Balthazar, the contractor, has worked in New England.
It can also be bad concrete too,
Right.
Stephen.
Right.
It can
I
also be
mean-
poor workmanship. There are other factors.
Balthazar knows when winter's coming, and they know how long it takes concrete to cure, and I never heard a word about being forewarned that if people salt their sidewalks, or we should put out I'll call to Converse Street to tell people, don't put salt down on your sidewalks, try and use calcium chloride or something like that.
Right.
First we heard of it was when we went out to do the site walk, and we saw the delamination on the concrete.
Yeah.
So, again, even if, you know, it is caused by salt from the town spreading operations bouncing up on the sidewalk, or people driving over their driveways with it, you know, why didn't they, then they should have either poured it sooner or waited.
Mhm. Do you have a third party that's going to look at it, Stephen?
It's, right now, it's between we are the third party, quite honestly. It's Mass
Okay.
DOT and the vendor and us. We're the third party looking at it.
Okay. In the discussion, has there been any preliminary conclusions?
Some preliminary discussions about it, but it's still preliminary. The site walk was Thursday? Wednesday, something like that. The site walk was last week, and I know that Mass DOT is talking to the contractor about options.
Do you know if there's been a discussion that it was a bad installation? No?
I don't know.
Okay.
I think that discussion's coming. I don't think they're there yet.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, then, I guess the question then is, I guess we'd have to go back and look at the records. It doesn't seem like the sidewalk work that was done for equal 400,000, that's all. That's why I was wondering. If we're converse, if we're up in there doing all that, then yeah, I could easily do it. Because I think last time, I think it's up more than 45 mark. It may be $75 a lineal foot now. It's getting more and more expensive.
That's $100, probably close to $100 a linear foot.
Yeah, that's what.
They're up to 100 now? Okay, it was 45 last contract I had any familiarity with that Mike was running.
I know it's up there.
Okay.
Okay, so if we have no further comments on the town manager's report, let's, I think we should move to new business and have Chief Dearborn present. So if you can step up and tell us about the emergency cost recovery fees and emergency management update, that would be great.
Well, good evening.
Good evening. Thank you for coming, and
That's
we got your memo and
Is that the same?
your
We should
lists.
update it. Okay.
Yeah, the document that Deb's passed around is for the second presentation.
Okay.
Okay. So good evening. I come before you tonight with a proposal for cost recovery I know the subject's come up a few times in the past. Mainly, we've had the discussions around the Route 91 responses and some of the other areas where we can hopefully seek to recoup costs for some types of emergency responses. In the past year or two, we've had different opportunities to recover costs for emergency responses. There's kind of a narrow window of the types of emergency responses we can recoup costs on. I think we've taken advantage of a few of them that are governed by Mass General Law. Some of them are by situation. So I've done quite a bit of research, looked at some of the other emergency services in the area, spoken to a lot of the fire chiefs, emergency management agencies to see actually how people are doing it. Everybody struggles with this. Looking for the opportunities to recoup costs for emergency response. Many of the laws are cited as that many of our services simply, as part of being a taxpayer, we can't bill you for the services. However, there are specific instances when we can. And I can run through, I don't know if you've got a chance to review the memo I sent you. One of the big ones is under MGL 21E, and this is really response to oil and hazardous material incidents. Under the Mass General Law, we can recoup costs from the responsible party, the spiller or potential spiller of the oil hazardous materials, for our immediate response and subsequent standby response from that, and any actions that we take after that. Under that is any emergency service provided by the community. So when you look to the cost recovery rates, I've actually added DPW resources and police resources to those, including labor rates. The other one is related to standby services, and this is relatively equal to like a detail rate. We're finding this more and more on Route 91, but we have had some scenarios within the town here where we have a major accident, such as a tractor-trailer accident, where it takes many, many hours to recover that vehicle. And the tow contractors or Mass DOT or certain agencies will require a fire department standby for that activity. In the past, we haven't really pursued those costs because we didn't know the avenue to pursue the cost recovery. But through the research, and we actually just did this successfully, we actually passed those, were detailed through the tow companies doing the recovery, and they in turn pursue the insurance company of the responsible party and then reimburses our costs. Plan details of special events are another area. Fireworks displays, we have details on the Connecticut River that were requested for each year, and those charges would be part of this package. We do currently charge for details, however, we didn't have up-to-date rates for our apparatus and equipment. There are rare occasions when we must undertake actions to properly secure a property. The most recent was the Elmwood fire. We had to do an emergency demolition on that one. That one, we didn't end up incurring direct costs on that, but that was kind of a lesson learned. We were able to make literally as the wrecking ball was going to the house, we were able to secure an agreement with the insurance company on it. Now, the code enforcement or through the building commissioner, we can file an emergency order that does transfer the cost, the responsibility to the owner. However, if we need to pass those costs on, it's kind of blurry on our own costs. Does that make sense? Because we didn't have specific rates for that. All right. So by establishing rates, we can further cost recovery for our services. I didn't explain that real well, so and it's kind of a difficult situation because they're rare. The other thing is like emergency fencing. On some occasions, we have to order that on our severely damaged facility. Just as a note, under MGL 21E, the town should never engage in any hazardous waste disposal. 21E, the state environmental laws, is clear on that. DEP will contract directly for that. We never want to take the responsibility for hazardous waste or waste disposal for a private party. So there are some other examples here. There's another scenario, criminal acts, unjust acts, where our costs for response can be attached to a legal case. For my previous work, prior to being chief of the Hazardous Material Division for the state, we would do that in clandestine labs. So if you had somebody who was doing something illegal on a property, required a fire department, police department, DPW response, you can actually attach the cost of that response to the criminal case. So unfortunately, the likelihood of recouping those costs, but you never know. In some cases, it'll surprise you sometimes. So how did I arrive at these rates? I looked at some of the regional rates. What I found, though, through my research is these are actually the FEMA or the federal rates that we're utilizing. What we did is the FEMA rates or the GSA rates, which Richard's probably familiar with, they include labor or manned equipment. Because of our collective bargaining agreements and the different levels of people we have in town, I removed the labor rates from all the equipment, and it's per the collective bargaining agreement. So on page 3 of your proposal, I have the rates. And if you have any direct questions on those, I can answer those, so.
Mark Gold, please.
A couple of questions, Chief. One is, is your intent that we would review these rates or upgrade these rates on a periodic basis? I don't know if it's annual or whatever. I assume like we do all other rates?
Yes.
Because I was thinking otherwise we could somehow write these in more generic so that we don't have to update them as frequently for things like labor rates or things like that.
They already have a suite of fees in the fee schedule that we do, so we would just add it to the fee schedule, keep it all consolidated.
And we would approve, your intent is that we would approve these as part of our
Well, we review them every year.
We do calendar and we do fiscal year rates.
These
so
would be
that-
fiscal,
Okay.
Yes.
and we would just, like you said, Mark, we would review them. We wouldn't, we don't always change them.
Right.
But we at least look at them
Okay.
every year.
Second question is, you beside the 21E, you'd also given us a list of other instances where, recovery of fees is potential. Is there some way to put that together in a list that's published, or is the risk that we don't be all-inclusive and by omission we miss something that?
Yeah, so I hear exactly what you're saying, and I put a lot of thought into that, and exactly how you answer that question is there's so many different scenarios where this could come up. For example, an aircraft crash, that type of incident. Those are, because of the FAA regulations, those are actually cost recoverable. But it all depends on the type of aircraft, and, if it was a federal aircraft, much different than a private aircraft. Boat recoveries in the Connecticut River, for what purpose are we doing that? And is there even, so there's so many different scenarios out there to try to narrow it down. I think we need to look at it on pretty much a case-by-case basis. There could be cases where it impacts a homeowner negatively, where we have one of these cases where we may say, this case here, we shouldn't, and I may go to the town manager and say, hey, here's a case where this would negatively impact a resident. In the state 21K regulations, which are for state entities to recoup costs, they actually have an innocent homeowner provision. So if a homeowner has a release of oil or hazardous materials, that is not due to an illicit intent, or that they're not responsible for the costs. I think that, there has to be some latitude in this also.
So I guess my last question, so how would you intend that we approve or authorize, and I don't know which level it is,
Yeah.
of these fees being implemented, and so that they don't come through as arbitrary, but come through as, truly being based on recoverable costs?
So I'm asking to add these rates as an addendum to our current rates and fees that we have established. So I can utilize these when we identify cost recoverable instances. So, Mandy, did I answer your question?
I guess.
Okay, Marie?
I want to just understand better. Cost recoverable, in other words, if I have a fire in my house,
Not
that's not it.
cost recoverable.
If a bunch of kids get their car stuck in the ditch, and you have to pull them out. I mean, is it depend if they're residents, or does it
Nope.
depend on,
Nope.
how
So
do you decide what is?
Right, so there, again, 21E, that dictates, those are pretty clear. If we're requested for specific details, like a towing contractor says, we need a fire truck standby while we recover this vehicle. We pass those costs on to the towing contractor. We're basically working for that contractor at that point. So, and that's how we establish it. If somebody hires us for a detail, you can't remember, they're contracting with us, but we don't have, currently, we have no established rates to build these people.
Okay,
So,
thank you.
yes, sir.
Recovery against the state for accidents on 91.
I had a feeling you were going to ask that. You know, this is a almost monthly conversation with my fellow fire chiefs and emergency managers up and down the Route 91, 291 corridor. This is a step closer to that. Typically, these are the incidents when they become eligible for cost recovery, are these longer duration. I'll give you an example. We had an incident in January, 7 hours, the Route 91 shut down. Fire, police, resources tied up most of the day. A lot of money was spent. So in that instance, we were contracted by the tow company to do the standby, which is the majority of the time spent that day. We submitted a bill. We received the payment in under 30 days. So we recovered all, not the emergency response portion, but the detail part of it. So those are the instances. So this is a step better than what we've been doing, Mr. Lowe. So.
Great. And now, so Chief, when you've been in the fire service for a long time, and so earlier in your career, did you ever scratch your head and say, gee, I wonder if the town ever gets any reimbursement for this? Or is this something you learned as you become chief? Is it all of a sudden you like, wait a second?
So so in my previous life, working, I was the deputy director for hazmat for the whole state. So I'm very familiar with the 21K legislation. In fact, I've worked on the innocent homeowner provision for that and other aspects of that when that law went into effect. So I'm very familiar with cost recovery from the state side. 21E, and I'm very familiar with that from the fire department perspective. However, it's how you exercise it. And you need, quite frankly, you need to identify opportunities to go after those charges. So when we have that oil spill on the highway, that's eligible. Let's go ahead and get the cost recovery on that. Where before we may have passed that opportunity over. So.
Well, I want to congratulate you. This is really good. I'm impressed that you have been, that you said, yeah, this is what we should be doing, and it's something new that our fire department hasn't really taken advantage of in the past, right? This would be
the 21E charges, we just haven't been consistent on it, but we have done that.
So we've gotten some, but now we're fine tuning.
I think we do much better, yeah.
And we'll do a better job. So I appreciate your effort on this. Mark? You have
Yeah, I'd like to make a motion if I could.
Yes.
I'd like to move that we authorize the emergency management chief to seek appropriate recovery of costs and adopt the fee schedule as proposed.
Do we have a second?
Second.
Okay. All right. Any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay. Thanks, Chief. And now we move on to emergency preparedness. Right?
So I gave you this document, and I apologize for it not being in your packages because there's actually been some development in the last few days. I've been working and I know Ms. Angelides is aware of the MVP program, and I've been doing some work on that. So I'll just kind of give you an idea where we're at. So emergency preparedness for the community, although fortunately we don't have a lot of large-scale emergencies, it's an everyday event, the preparation for that. And there are more and more demands on emergency management, and there's more and more opportunities for us also. I've spent a lot of times working with the town manager to try to improve our emergency management. I think we've made some pretty big strides in the last couple of years with kind of the reorganization of the emergency management team with the Tier 1 and Tier 2 groups. I can tell you that, and I believe that's working very well. As you recall, that we reorganized, all of our department heads have an emergency management responsibility, and some of the DPW employees, our public health nurse, our council on aging counselor, everybody, they all have different roles in there. The model we used to have, everybody was just one big team, which we kind of still are, but we've kind of refocused the efforts. We've broken into two groups. Our Tier 1 group, which is the most active group, is police, fire, DPW, the town manager, finance director or assistant town manager, and the schools when we deem necessary. That is what we call our operational group. So all the emails that you guys see that I'm writing at 5 o'clock in the morning about the improper weather forecast, once again, that's in regards mainly to the Tier 1 group. It's how our town is actively preparing for a weather event, a planned event, could be anything that we can look forward on. We do meet fairly regularly. It seemed like we met every other day. We had 1 week we spent more time together than probably at home. So we talk about the preparations, and I'm really at a comfortable level with that aspect for the operational group. Planning, our response plans, and every time we meet, we get a little bit more out of it. We push the plans a little bit further, the what ifs a little bit further. So I think it's been very productive. We talk about another little piece of paper we might have to do or something like that. The second group is what I call my Health and Human Services group. So that's Board of Health, Park and Rec, Council on Aging, our Building Commissioner, let me know if I forget anybody, our Council on Aging counselor, public health nurse when necessary, and the schools roll into that one also. Also, the Tier 1 group, that first group, is also part of that. But that group really focuses on human services for town. So, in an emergency, what are our big human services needs? Warming, cooling centers, shelter capability, recovery, all right, buildings, restaurants, schools, get everything back open. Once you can start to open your community again, that's the first real step to recovery. So what we've done is we've divided up these two groups so they can really focus on what they do daily. Those of you who have been involved in the NIMS, the National Incident Management System, there's a lot of terms out there that it talks about planning and operations and logistics people. And if I start giving those terms to people who have never worked in this before, even if I train them on it, they really don't know what the roles are. So we've adopted the emergency support function model, which is the same model MEMA utilizes in the bunker, and it identifies specific emergency support functions that are basically the jobs these people do every day in town. All right, every day in town, this town operates. A lot of times in the blind. There's a lot of people doing a lot of different things. When it comes to emergency, we want those people to continue to do those same jobs they do, but maybe for longer periods of time and on a bigger scale. All right, so we take our Park and Rec director who's involved in our sheltering. What does Barry do every day? She organizes large groups of people. Who better suited to organize a shelter? All right, and occupy those people's time. So we take those people that they have those skill sets and we push them forward. Board of Health, they help with the shelter, with the health and medical needs for our citizens, but at the same time, we got to get restaurants open. We need to get schools open again, so they're in that. Our Building Commissioner, he's out doing his thing every day, inspections, things like that, but in an emergency, we have buildings that are damaged. We need to get these people back in their houses, restaurants open, schools back open, so he has a function that's an emergency support function. So it's basically their everyday job on steroids. So I feel pretty good about that. We've advanced those roles in town. You know, Mr. Pastursek is our finance director. Well, trust me, in emergency management, the finance is one of the most important things. For those of you that were around for the October storm, cost recovery is a huge deal. And we learned a lot of lessons for that, and there's a lot of tools that we've implemented that if that happens again to that scale, we can track it. I hope that we can track the cost better because we put a lot of tools in place for that. But there's a lot of stuff from emergency management that goes on in the background. That's kind of where we're at today. Where we're going forward is I've listed out these 17 initiatives that are, some are small projects, some are bigger projects, some are maintenance projects. So I don't know if we really want to take a lot of time to run through all of them. If there's any specific ones you identify, you want to shoot me a question at, to the chair?
Marie?
Actually, I'm not sure where it goes in here. You talked about how you have to form a committee or a
Yep.
council, and so where does that come in?
Yep.
And where's your timeline for that?
So you're going to go down to the 006 LEPC organization.
Okay.
All right, and I'm going to go right to your subject then. So, Local Emergency Planning Committee. So, background history of LEPCs, they're mainly around the SARA Title III regulations, which don't really apply to this town. They're mainly around chemical plants, chemical transportation. We don't manufacture much in this town, right?
But we have the trains.
But we do. We have
Yeah.
trains, we have pipelines, we have Route 91. All right, we have a lot of truck traffic on. but it's more slated for fixed facilities, okay? So I've sat as a regional representative on LEPCs for the hazmat world, so I'm really familiar with the function on that. So these are planning committees geared to plan around chemical emergencies. We have a little bit of exposure for that here, but not a lot. However, you can take that same structure and you can apply it to both public and private or stakeholder investment into emergency planning. So in our town, we have a great opportunity with that. We have Bay Path University, all the elderly complex, our faith-based groups, people that we can bring into the emergency management fold and engage them in planning and preparedness for the town. So when we have that big emergency, it's not the 6 or 8 department heads in our small departments trying to do every function in the entire town. Those private stakeholders that want to engage can actually provide non-governmental services. So I'll go to the Municipal Vulnerability Planning, which is a grant opportunity that's coming up, and that's actually attached to the Community Resiliency Planning. So there's kind of two, and it also goes to our Hazard Mitigation Grant. So you picture 3 programs that are kind of sitting out there that we don't see much joy from. The Hazard Mitigation Grant, it's a big document, it's a 5-year document. We're in year 3 of it right now. It identifies kind of the big global hazards for our community. You know, flooding, weather events, the highway, hazardous materials, transportation. There's several categories on it. Now there's kind of a set of these 2 new ones, the Municipal Vulnerability Plan and the Community Resiliency Program. Those are 2, basically they do a lot of the stuff from our hazard mitigation plan are going to roll into those. The exception of both those plans require stakeholder input. Okay, so those same stakeholders the private stakeholders I just spoke about, we need to engage those in order to engage in these plans. If we work through all these, we can actually secure more grant funding. For planning, for some funding. The planning's the big one because for the hazard mitigation money, which is the big money projects out there, you need to have those as shovel-ready as possible. So if you don't have that seed money from these other grants, you probably won't be successful in the hazard mitigation grants. So the MVP grant program has been out, it was adopted in 2016, signed by the governor. It was rolled out last year. I can tell you that the only Western Mass community that fully engaged in it was Springfield, and I'll explain why in a minute. There's only a handful of other Western Mass communities, it's only a handful statewide, that actually engaged in the project at all, is because under last year's program, it required 80 hours of home reinvestment. So with many grants, there's a match, okay, a financial match. A lot of our grants, it's 5%, 10%. This required a labor match, and mainly by our department heads. There was also a lot of requirements for stakeholder meetings. The requirements were really out of control. So this year, it's going to be, so that was April last year. We didn't apply for it at that time. Honestly, there was a couple reasons we didn't. They were told us to wait a year, the state officials, because they were still sorting out. It's going to be launched again. It was actually supposed to come out in April. I spoke with Catherine from Pioneer Valley Planning on Thursday this week. They believe it's going to be in sometime in May. It's going to be released. So that they're actually going to par down a lot of those requirements. And we can engage with Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to do the grant for us, or we can do it on our own. And really, I need to assess, is it something I can do in-house or something I need to engage them with? Depending on what's available, every year based on populations, how much they award for funding on the grant. If we can still have money to do some future planning and hire Pioneer Valley Planning Commission to actually do the grant, I probably would go that direction if it's something I can handle on my own. This document here is actually from their seminar of actually forward-looking consolidation of all your emergency management initiatives. So we took everything that we've got in town now that we've identified. These are all things that fall under emergency management. Forward-looking projects. We've got those organized. We've got actually a bunch of the work done that we believe is going to be required for the grant. It's the stakeholder input, so all their initiatives will have to be rolled into that. So I think you'd asked earlier about a possible vote on that, and I would ask you if you could entertain me by waiting on that, because I believe the recommended motions for that will come out in the new RFP, which should be out. But I'm on top of it. I've been talking to Catherine a couple times a week. I've done the webinars on it. Myself and my deputy, we're on point with it. And it is, because we can dovetail it with this LEPC, it's a really efficient way to accomplish a really big goal all at once. So we're trying to streamline it. You know, we have a lot of other roles and responsibilities. These are kind of the second and third hats we wear. So we really want to try to be efficient with this as we roll it out. The other part of the LEPC is once we've got the initial application in for review, once we get that out for the formal application, I'll need to come back to you folks for a formal vote on for the organization of the LEPC. So I expect to have that before October. That's the goal for that. So.
Oh, I just, if you don't mind, so this grant would fund us for a 3-year period, or how long?
I think that's a 2-year one.
2 years?
It's 2 years to actually spend down.
Okay.
Don't quote me on that, because I haven't seen the new, this is based on the 2017 information, not the 2018, so.
So we'd have 2 years, and during that 2 years, you'd have to match with a person 80 hours a week?
Again, that was under the
Or two people,
2017.
obviously.
I am told that they've reduced those commitments significantly for the 2018, so.
Okay, yeah, because 80 hours.
Because it scared a lot of
is-
people away, quite frankly.
Wow.
I actually have the map of the communities that engaged in it, and they didn't hit 10% of the whole state, so it was not. It's a heavy lift
Yeah.
under the original format.
So if things didn't change and we needed 80 hours, so that'd be 2 people, obviously, and then,
Yeah, I
and we
think
do
I
it
would-
those 2 years. Now, at the end of 2 years, would we have established enough of a plan and a network
So because we'd be a
response team?
certified, we'd be a certified community,
We'd be
so we don't have to
certified.
redo that, but it does keep us eligible for future grants.
Okay,
Similar to LEPC, once we establish it, we get a startup grant for that, but then we become eligible for both the CERC and the SEMP grants, so.
but after that 2 years, we would need to still have a special person who would be doing this?
No, I don't believe so. If you look on the plan, probably from item 9 down to 14, those are all plans that we maintain. We have plan after plan after plan.
Yeah.
They just require almost constant maintenance.
Okay, and this response is really just the initial, like, how many hours? It could be 24 hours or less, and then FEMA generally comes in? Is that how it would work if there was some major, like, let's say, God forbid,
Yep.
we have a lot of planes flying over our town. A plane came down, and so we initiated this team and had a response. And then who steps in? The Department of Aviation comes in, they take over, or I don't know?
So, I'll be quite frank with you. I have quite a bit of experience on big events.
Yeah.
In my previous role, I went all over the state with it. The local community is always the people in charge. All right, nobody comes in and is going to take over unless there's no Long Meadow left. But as
Okay.
long as we have a functioning government,
Yeah.
we're still responsible for this deal.
Okay.
So they'll come in and offer us assistance, and we'll task them, and they'll stand us up. But we're always responsible for our community and our community's recovery. So
Mhm.
yeah.
And the other thing I didn't hear you mention is coordination with neighboring towns who might send, like East Longmeadow or
Yep,
Enfield or
so
Springfield.
I can speak on that. I don't want to take up a ton of your time, but,
Yeah.
so we have active mutual aid, with police, fire, DPW, we're all engaged in the statewide mutual aid system. So that happens almost every day.
Okay.
And that's just
Yeah.
a normal everyday business. We have mutual aid agreements more on a regional basis with the Western Mass and the Western Homeland Security Council.
Mhm.
And all those resources come to bear. MEMA brings all those things to bear. One of the things we're working on right now is regional training for sheltering. Ms. Hirschhorn, our Board of Health Director, procured a grant to run full-scale sheltering exercises which is the high school here. And I also procured grants for tabletop exercises. However, the tabletop exercise, the requirement is that they be regional. Which regional is a good investment in some things. To train regionally on sheltering, if for some reason we couldn't utilize the high school, we need to go somewhere else, we can start to actually have a familiarity with each other, so doing some regional training. A shelter is pretty much a shelter is a shelter. It's the same model, whether they're doing it in Long Meadow or East Long Meadow, where we move it. It certainly doesn't take away our own community's capability, but to share those resources, or at least train the same way, is certainly a good investment. So it's what we could, I mean, redundancy is a huge term in emergency management.
Well, thanks for answering my questions.
Yep.
Anyone else on the board have any additional questions? Okay, and then Marie?
Actually, there were 3 areas I wanted to talk to you about.
Sure.
One, I want to go back to that committee, because I'm
Yep.
not sure if it's the same one. I remember you saying you needed to reorganize because you were required, and we were the only community who didn't have this
Yep.
emergency management
That-
committee.
Actually, that is the local emergency planning committee.
And so that's not the LEPC.
That is.
That is, it's the emergency management. So where are we?
They're two different, yeah. So we have emergency management team,
Uh-huh.
that's our department heads.
Right.
The local emergency planning committee is strictly a planning function,
Mm-hmm.
and that includes our emergency management team, but it includes private stakeholders.
So that is the LEPC
That is the
organization
LEPC,
that you were
yes.
talking about.
Yep.
And where are we in finally getting that established?
So as I stated, we've submitted our, what we call our structural documents for that,
Mm-hmm.
and our proposed organization with that, those are within the state. So once that gets approved, that's kind of like your mission statement,
Mm-hmm.
your goals and objectives. I'll be coming back to you for a formal vote on actually those goals, objectives, the mission statements, and you can certainly have input at that point. It's initial framework stuff that we've put in, and that should, the timing of that should be September, October.
Okay.
Yep,
Yeah, that's what I was wondering.
yep.
And then you were talking about tabletop and regional emergency planning. Have you ever thought of going after the casino regional money to do a regional emergency planning around any crisis that could occur around the casino?
Police department's doing it.
Yeah,
Yeah, they are,
So,
okay.
yeah.
And then now the MVP.
Yep.
Okay. The MVP, so you're saying they might require, right now it's going to take about 80 hours to get it up and going. You're
Last-
saying it could be less.
yes, that's
Yeah.
based on last year's information.
But a lot of that is stakeholder meetings and things like that, and I think there has to be public forums also to encourage that. So
Yes.
you could actually, try to use Rebecca or the Energy Task Force or anything to help you pull those together, because it's a little different. I know it layers on top, but it's a little different from the emergency management program and things that you've been planning, because when I was listening to Catherine speak, she says it's things like our records being in the basement of the store's library.
Yeah, that's
That
actually,
could actually be brought up under some of the money that's done.
right, so if you look at this plan here, actually, one of the things is townhouse, community house, emergency power, okay? So office relocation plan, those are all resiliency program, projects. Moving records, record storage, those are all resiliency projects. And that's why, when Stephen and I was struggling with all the different things we had going on. I mean, some days it just feels like you're throwing darts. So Stephen said, we really need to start dovetailing a lot of these things, and I was glad we had that conversation. I said, yep, we'll focus on that. Then actually, in the MVP program, they provide matrices to actually start consolidating some of your planning. So it actually got me focused, I'll be quite honest with you. So the pre-planning I did for this grant that's gonna come out actually got us kind of better organized, so. And again, there's all the alphabet agencies, and they're all reaching out to us with different agendas and opportunities, and it drives you crazy, so.
Yeah, and some of the things they were also talking about is like right now how our sewer treatment plant is in a floodplain, and we can actually get money to help protect that.
Right, so
And
that-
security issues around the sewage plant. So you'd be able to pull in more projects than probably what you were looking at in emergency planning.
Yep, so under the MVP, that qualifies you to do planning, the hazard mitigation grant, which I know Mark's really familiar with. So actually, that's the big money project. So to do to do a power, emergency power plan for all the town campus, community house, town hall, police station, fire department, okay? that's a vulnerability we have now. We have it identified. We had a minor power outage the other day and shut down half the town functions, okay? Right now, we have a 30% power at the police station, fire department's 100%, but it's single source fuel, natural gas, which is not the most reliable emergency backup. And community house is zero power, town hall is one circuit, right? So we're very vulnerable to power outages for our town government to function. First step for recovery is town government to function. All right, so that's a vulnerability that we have identified, so that actually goes into that. Relocation of town offices, we have opportunities now with the DPW, maybe a project that's coming out of town for town meeting, where we can have the opportunity to look at those facilities and make plans that we have to move everybody out of the community house or the town hall or the police department. Where can we move those? We have preliminary plans for those right now. They're not very resilient plans, I'll be honest with you. So with this new construction, we need to consider all of these different opportunities. All the stuff that's going on in town are opportunities for us, and we need to dovetail them all together, so.
And we have to not just look at the big ticket items, because often there's just money left over in small grants that could pick up some of the smaller items.
Yep, so like the emergency management trailer, so you're talking like a couple $1,000s, and we're really consolidating a bunch of emergency management generators and tents in there, in that. So we have to deploy, we actually used it the other day at Center School during a power outage, so they could have hot lunch. So we're building that out. Our EOC modernization, it's like a $4,000 project, right? Putting some more monitors in there so we can better tie into the town cameras, things like that. So everything dovetails together. We're just trying to organize it so we can be efficient.
So you
and I
think
certainly
you-
appreciate any input from anybody, so.
So you think you'll be able to make the next round of the application in May?
Yeah, I believe so, yes. So.
Okay, Mark?
Just a quick question. In all the discussion, what I didn't hear was IT. And I guess just a quick question of where does IT fit into this in
Yep.
terms of IT recovery, IT maintenance?
And that was my fault. So IT is part of our tier 2 group
Okay.
and the tier 1 group for messaging.
Okay, that's,
They don't always attend the meetings because
Oh.
with my phone, I can tell them anything I want. Stephen, we can get messaging out really quick. But for storage, of document storage, things like that, they're all involved in that.
well, also for maintaining IT operations during emergencies.
Right,
they're
or
critical.
relocating offices and stuff like that. They've been involved in that, all that planning, so.
One of the things that Nick George has done as IT director is he partnered with the IT director in East Long Meadow, and they wrote a community compact grant. East Long Meadow wrote the community compact grant to connect to their fiber network, so we have some redundancy for our network. So that, so in both, you said about the big ticket items, I think we're fortunate that we are doing well on some of the big ticket items. But I think we are also doing very well on the smaller micro level. And there's also big ticket items also have smaller components. The DPW building has in its program an 8x8 high density storage document storage room with the rolling things, and that was something that, quite frankly, I put in and said, we need one of those rooms because our document storage is really risky. And so it's a pretty small amount of money on a $15 million project, a small 8x8 room with some, shelving equipment, but it's a huge deal for us to be able to do that. And so those are the types of things where I think the chief said it best. We are relentless in pursuing opportunities to do things better and to find ways to be efficient or find a grant that fits with what we're already doing. I mean, sometimes not, we can hit this conversation all the time. Not all grants are great. Some grants you're better off not having because it may force you into operating a certain way or developing certain programs that really are outside your core competency or would be difficult to maintain. So we try and look at each program on their own merit and decide what we're going to pursue based on how we are, but also where we want to get to. And like I said, this list is great. I mean, to me, what this says is we have great leadership when it comes to emergency management, and have, because a lot of these programs have been kind of working for a long time. The hazard mitigation grant we voted on a few years ago, or you guys voted on a few years ago. That was a major undertaking, and it's one of those things that hugely important for the town. It was a significant undertaking, and then now it's on the shelf. We don't talk about it anymore, but we have the comfort of knowing that it's there.
Okay.
We'll have to renew it in 2 years.
We have for another 2 years, yeah.
All right. And just to follow up on Mark's point, we usually assume that the local television stations are going to film anything that goes on if there was a major, but they may not. If there was something that happened and they couldn't get here, is our local LCTV able to document, and film stuff? Could we, is
Yes.
that part of this plan?
No, yes and no.
Yes and no,
They
but-
they have remote capabilities.
Yeah.
It hasn't been a major consideration.
So we'd be dependent on handheld stuff at this point. Somebody, but not, do we have a designated like, I used to work for the Navy, and the Navy
Oh.
has like photographers on every ship, and their job is to make sure that there's photos, and,
Yep.
they have to
Yeah, no.
document what's going on.
I wasn't following you the first second,
Okay, yeah,
but
and so
now I'm with you. So
documenting, like, what is
we do
going
have
on.
actually documentation procedures that the DPW actually, if you look at our debris management, number 10 there,
Yeah.
the plan update. So there's multiple components to that. One of them is documenting where the debris came from. So we actually, part of that plan incorporates GPS, and we have handheld GPSs,
Mm-hmm.
photograph, estimate of tonnage, where we're gonna take it to, what we're gonna do with it.
Okay.
But the town's changing a little bit on different locations where we might do that, so that's a plan that needs to be updated probably every 2 to 3 years.
Mhm.
So it's because that's another alphabet agency, you have to file that with the Mass DEP. So
Mhm.
another agency you have to deal with, so.
Yeah, well, because, reconstruction, they need all that kind of stuff
Yep.
for, down the
Yeah, we do have
road.
a plan for that, and then anything that's criminal or stuff like that, that'd fall into the police department, unfortunately, we've had experience with that, so.
So, and I
Yeah.
you mentioned cameras. One of the things I think I mentioned this last time, one of the things we're doing with we have a few development projects that are in various stages of planning. One of the things we're doing in our plan reviews is we are asking the developers to install security cameras and allow the police department to tie into them from the station
Mhm.
remotely. And that's something that, the cost of that's going down year over year, and our ability to plug in is getting better. And so we're asking, and not only just cameras, certainly cameras inside, but cameras that may be pointing to streets.
Yeah.
Because it's helpful when, if there's a robbery or an Amber Alert or something like that, where you can go back and say, which way did they go out of town? And you can have secure cameras covering, the streets, so you can say, oh, geez, that vehicle we're looking for drove by at, 405 or something,
Mhm.
So that is something that we are trying to develop as well.
Yeah, and it's listed on here as item number 4. And the townwide cameras are a great emergency management tool. You can really tell what the conditions are around town, as long as the cameras are still working. We're
Right.
with that, but they are fairly robust. And the emergency operations center at the fire station, with the modernization of that, we'll actually be able to tie in and select cameras to monitor, so we can tell our weather conditions deteriorating, is there something going on, where we have camera access in town, so
Mhm.
it's a tool, another tool in the toolbox, so.
Now, out in the Berkshires and different places, they would have fire towers every now and then to see what was going on. And we have this new tower going up by Blinn Tennis Courts. Would we have a camera up there that would be able to review, if something was going on? I mean, is that
That's
something
unaware
that
of.
could happen? I mean, that maybe we should look into that. Not as, I mean, would be a modern fire tower, but you could have a camera that would probably, even a
So-
computer would.
So cameras for real-time information
Yeah.
are only as good as the person watching them.
Yes.
To be quite honest with you, cameras are good if something has happened or we know we want to watch a specific area for a specific
Yeah.
purpose, that's really their functionality.
Yeah.
You can have 30 cameras displayed unless you have somebody delegated to sit there and watch them.
Right, yeah.
They don't. Now, well, we'll talk offline, I'll explain
Okay.
FLIR technology to you and how it could probably work, but that's a whole different
Okay.
subject.
Yeah, I think our focus is more on fixed locations on buildings, so you capture multiple viewpoints, and then
Yeah.
they get recorded. Like, if you have a camera that circles and something happens when it's pointing in the other direction, you'll never know.
Right.
Right. But like I say, computers can do some of that. We'll talk offline. Thank you very
Okay.
much, Chief. Any other questions, Marie?
So on the MVP, it's not really listed as one of the projects. Is
No,
that
that's actually
because-
one of the grants, so if you look at the different grants down below, And I hadn't, when I did this, the HMG, the EMPG, but I didn't list the, because I didn't know the, where we could apply it yet when I started writing this, so.
So to go down below,
Yeah,
MVP?
down in the funding area. Yep.
Okay. And then the other question, when you mentioned cameras, and you have that, are you talking and looking at probably the grants that are coming out in regards to school safety plans?
Yeah,
And
we
issues?
are, yeah.
So is that something that you would be layering on the safety, security, and preparation initiatives?
You want to get into that now?
Well, in terms of school safety, I mean, that's an ongoing process that, started just, years ago. We're not just reacting to most recent events. And I think that the chief, both Chief Stankiewicz and Chief Dearborn will probably come back at a future meeting and give a more detailed presentation about the efforts on school safety. It's kind of a standalone. Emergency preparedness and school safety aren't really the same thing, and so they are. There's a couple. If we talked about this morning at staff meeting, there's a couple of things that are in the offing for school safety that they're working on. I would anticipate next month or so they'll be back to kind of give a presentation.
Oh,
on
that's soon. So we'll hear about for the next
Yes.
30 or 60 days.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, great.
And the other thing I want to caution in terms of expectations is the message that we want to convey is we are, I say working on it, but we do work on it, and we are preparing as best you can for something like that, but we're probably not going to get into a lot of operational details for, I would like to think, obvious reasons.
Well, it's just, you said that you like to put everything together into this plan, so I thought that would be layered on top of it too. I mean, like we prepare for school safety issues, we prepare for one of the freight
Yeah,
trains to go off, and I mean, so I thought it might be under your, but you're saying we're gonna handle that a little separately.
It's related, it overlaps. There's certain aspects that we want to preserve operational security with, so,
Okay, but in regards to requests for capital equipment and things like that, you'll come up with a plan?
yeah, and we
come
do
to us
use,
for.
we have utilized some of these grant programs to support those programs, so.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. If we have no further questions, thank you very much for
Okay, thank you very much.
coming in. As we move along, I guess we'll go back to old business, and we could ask for someone to forward a motion regarding the minutes of March 19th.
So moved.
Do we have a second? Approving the minutes of March 19th.
Was I here? I'm trying to look back.
Old business.
Second.
Mark was absent.
Mark was
Mark was
absent. This was the last meeting.
You had a second.
I have a second. Okay,
called,
thank you.
yeah.
I missed that. Okay. All those in favor? Okay.
Just abstain.
And one abstention. All right. The stormwater credit policy, we could quickly talk about that. We received a list which broke down the credits and who could be eligible for them. And I don't know, Stephen, you probably want to mention.
Well, the easiest path for us is to if you didn't want to do the whole thing, I guess you're not asking me what I would recommend, but if
Yeah.
if you short of the whole thing, which is the complete recommendation, I would recommend for now anyway the residential credits, because those are really they're tied to existing programs, and so people who are in need and get breaks on their property taxes or other things would automatically get these credits, and if you adopted that as your policy, that's fairly easy. The other ones require, I mean, the education one's a little, I think it helps out the school district and because that's us paying ourselves.
Right.
And I think one of the tenets of MS4 is raising awareness and education, so we put that in there to kind of incentivize that. The BMP credit is important because we do want to incentivize non-residential developers to manage stormwater on site. But the reason why we have an application fee is because it, you know, there is some level of inspection and enforcement that goes along with that, that creates an administrative burden that doesn't presently exist.
Mhm.
And I just don't know how that will play out. I don't think, I don't know, I don't think the spreadsheet is in here, but I had distributed an Excel document with an estimate of what we thought the cost to the town would be if some of these were taken by people, and I think the top 10 took them, and you have it there?
Yeah, it comes out to about a little over $11,000.
Yeah, so we're not talking big bucks, you know, that we're exposed to. But like I said, the easiest lift is just the residential credits. Not a lot of people would qualify, but the residential cost is fairly low as well.
Well, I guess I would like to agree with you that it would be probably simpler for tonight's meeting if we just voted on the residential, because there's other parts of this, maybe something that we'd probably want to discuss for quite a bit. Mark?
Yeah, just a question of how this gets administered. I mean, when you look at tax abatements, it goes before our Board of Assessors, and if you look at other things that go before other committees, I'm just wondering how this gets administered.
If we're talking about people who are standard, people who are veterans, people who are blind, those are pretty straightforward. So the other ones we'll need to discuss further, I agree. And we don't have to answer that question tonight, eh?
Well, I think-
Actually, the residential one, yeah.
So they have to present you should probably talk about how to get administrators do better than I do.
But, yeah, if they were to apply for any one of those other abatement types, veterans, blind, surviving spouses, all those, there are some documents that they have to supply in order to prove what they're really applying for. All that needs to be in place before they're approved. So the way that I would envision it working is that the DPW would work hand in hand with the assessor's office, that if somebody came in and did want the stormwater fee abatement, the DPW, again, would probably communicate with the assessor's office and ask if they have all their documentation in place and were they improved on their property tax level. If the answer was yes, then it's a no-brainer, because they're really the first line of defense, and if they're going to apply for anything where there's any value, it's on your real estate taxes at this point in time, as opposed to applying for a stormwater credit.
Mhm.
So the assessor's office would give a list of abatements awarded for the coming fiscal year,
Right.
and the DPW would take that list of names and addresses and apply the credits.
Mhm.
Kinda
So
automatically.
am I hearing that people would get stormwater abatements, pardon the expression, but automatically having applied for a parallel tax abatement?
I think they still need to apply for them, but it's not automatic.
I thought-
As long as they applied for them and their name was approved from a real estate standpoint, it would almost be rubber stamped, yes. But they still need to apply for the stormwater.
No, it's, they just need to get approved by the assessor, and it's
going automatically
it's automatically
here.
applied. So it says, the credit will be automatically applied annually to a property based on documentation of approval of CL 401C tax exemption by the Longmeadow Board of Assessors.
Okay. Then
That's
what
for
do you-
senior credit, but it's the same for all. So if you, again, it's a relatively small amount of money,
Yeah.
and so.
Right, well, for example, the senior base is credit's 20%, it's not a full abatement, it's a
No.
20%
Yeah,
credit.
these are all percentage abatements.
Right.
Okay,
And here, they're only saying it's a 30% reduction in the stormwater fee.
okay, so can we get a motion for that? Yes,
Move for to approve the residential credits.
we have a second?
Second.
Okay, any further discussion?
Yeah, I don't understand why we're just going for the residential.
Well, just
I
because
failed to understand why we're only taking a piece of this thing and wanting to approve it, so.
the rest of it's going to be a lot of discussion.
Well,
And we just
so
received
that's
it.
what our board's all about, isn't it?
Well,
That's not a good explanation, Tom.
well, no, I'm not explaining it, I'm saying.
Well, I
that-
asked the question. I thought
Okay.
you spoke. I thought that was an explanation.
No, that's not an
Maybe the
explanation.
town manager, can somebody tell me?
Well, my explanation is that it's going to take, I guess I would say
Okay,
that
I've already heard
it
yours. Now,
is going to
could I
take a
get
while
somebody
to
that may
get
have a
through
real
all of
answer?
these, things one by one.
And that's what our board is for.
Well, we got this, the other day, and I don't know, I was also, I think that, yeah, I guess that's what I think. I would follow the town manager's suggestion that we come, spend a little
I'm
more
not
time on
worried
the
about
rest of the
following
section.
anybody. I'm
Yeah.
asking a question, why
So
are we
let me-
splitting the
Why?
policy
Okay.
up?
Let me give this a try.
Yeah.
So, I suggest, there are parts of this that are somewhat complex. So I said, the recommendation is the whole thing. But if the board wanted to take an interim measure just to get a policy established prior to July 1st, when this goes into effect, the easiest thing is the residential, because it requires no really additional application process or administrative burden on the DPW. And then Marie made the motion, so I guess I would ask her why she,
Well, because I think it's worth it to take one bite at a time. It doesn't mean we don't go up to the BP, but I have a problem with the educational credit one. And I'm going to argue on some changes and adjustments on that.
When did we approve this,
the bylaw,
the bylaw?
a town meeting approved
A
it
year
last
ago.
May.
Yeah.
Okay. Exactly. Why are we piecemealing this? I don't understand.
Well, I don't want our delays,
We've had a year.
yeah, I know, but I don't want
Okay.
our delays to hurt the residents.
We've had a year.
Oh, I agree. We've had a year.
That's the question. Why are we piecemealing? Why is it being brought in right now in a piecemeal?
Well, we could,
Well, you could
It's-
approve the residential credits, and then you could make a motion to approve the BMPs, and then it could get seconded and discussed it, and we can hash it out. And
I-
you can do the whole policy in three separate pieces.
I guess I'm the only one questioning why it's taken a year to get this in front of us, and now we're being asked to just approve a piece of it.
well, I don't believe at this point in the evening that we'd have enough time to approve all three sections of this. That's what I think.
That still doesn't answer the question. I'm sorry. You can go for your vote if you want. I don't care what
Yeah.
you do, but this question's not been answered. This was approved a year ago.
Yeah.
It's before our board right now for partial approval because we don't have time to go through it. Well, why have we been sitting on it for a year then?
Well,
Why have we not had it before this board?
It's had, several changes. It's gone, it's been looked at, and gone through, several different renditions and changes. It's got some, it's red-lined and blue-lined, and I guess if you've been through the whole thing and you like what you see, it could be approved.
But the question is, this is the first time I've seen it, although it's been redlined, blue-lined, and approved. I think this intent is that the select board gets to put some input to it, and throughout this, I guess one of the questions I have is, and I'll just look at BMPs, it says, or even the educational credits, it says, you shall submit the following information, but nowhere does it say the criteria by which they will determine whether or not the abatement is been approved. Nowhere, I was looking for the words that say, a demonstrated such and such, that therefore you would get an abatement from it. All it says is you gotta have a proposed outline for a curriculum, that's it. It doesn't say, the outline, the curriculum can be worthless, it could be, and so, that's one of the reasons that and even the BMPs, it doesn't say, I mean, it has examples of BMPs and types of them, but it doesn't say anything about a demonstrated reduction in the stormwater runoff to the community. And also, when you say the DPW, I think we need to put into this who at the DPW or how at the DPW or what at the DPW, and clearly it ought to be somebody who deals with stormwater and stormwater utilities. And I don't know if it's the town engineer or it's the town.
It's in here, it's the director.
So it's the director of the DPW.
I mean, is the director gonna be out there measuring dry wells? No,
No.
but he's ultimately the one that signs off on it.
So we should keep our discussion to the motion, and then after the motion is voted on, we can then decide if we want to discuss this the rest of the night, or if we want to take on the other issues on the agenda. So I'm ready to, is there any other discussion about the amendment, or the motion? I would call for a vote.
And can I,
Yeah,
what sections of this are we approving? Are we approving an introduction and a residential credit? I mean, because we're not approving the document.
No.
So there's got to be something going into
It's just
into
for-
effect.
Yeah, it's just the
Well, but,
residential, it's for the discounts that we standardly give to people who qualify. That's all we're approving. That's what the motion was for.
so we're not necessarily approving this document as we are approving stormwater utility reductions to residents.
That's correct. All right,
It's a farce.
so
Yeah.
Well, you can
It's
vote
a
against
farce.
that motion.
I am, it's a farce.
All
We
right.
should be embarrassed.
well,
We should be embarrassed, it's
I'll call for a
ridiculous.
vote. All of those in
Well,
favor?
as soon as we close discussion, we still under discussion, or do you just want
Well, if you
to try
want
to
to
control
discuss, if
freak
you
the whole
want to
thing?
discuss the motion,
Okay?
we can discuss
We've
that.
tried
If
to
you
have a
wanna
discussion
discuss
on
the
this, and you've
farce-
tried to
if you wanna
close this
discuss what you
issue
call
every
farce
time.
About the thing, we can discuss that after this motion. but
No,
that
this
doesn't-
is part
that's
of
not the
this. It's
motion.
under discussion, Tom.
But-
That's the purpose of this board, is
Right.
to openly discuss issues.
Right.
and we
have
are
a motion.
trying to.
We have a motion, and we're discussing
And
the
you've
motion.
only got one opinion, and we've heard it 5 times.
Right.
And I've asked, still haven't got an answer on why we haven't had this proposal
Well-
before this time.
After we just vote on this motion, you're
It's like,
welcome to
again,
ask
it's
us
a
any
farce.
questions, forward any motions.
You should be ashamed.
Yeah, all right. So all those in favor of the motion to approve this? Okay. Those objected? Okay. So, now, do we want to entertain any other motions and discussion in regards to the stormwater credit policies?
Was there any changes you wanted to do in the introduction, Mark? Because you're good at wordsmithing. I didn't.
Frankly, Marie, I haven't taken the time to go through this because we just got it. I think I'd like to take a look at it more closely and propose it. But more importantly, like I said, it's weak in criteria. I mean, maybe because I think that if somebody's applying, especially an institution, applying for something beside what I'll call a hardship exemption, which is what we just approved, the DPW ought to be able to look at it very, subjectively and say, based on what you've supplied, you either get it or you don't, as opposed to, I mean, you just look at there's nothing wrong with the first couple of sections, but when it gets down to educational credits, all it says is a completed application and a proposed outline for curriculum. But, what's the curriculum have, including the target audience, class dates and times of the education process, and stated goals? But it doesn't say that those stated goals are our stated goals. Our stated goals need to be defined, both for this, and then when you get the BMPs, clearly the way it's written, it says you should be implementing best practices, which is what BMP stands for, right? Best management practices for reducing stormwater, but it doesn't say what the criteria, that if you reduce your stormwater by 5%, you're gonna get 5% rebate, or if you reduce it by 10%, it just says, show us your best practices, and I think that's too objective, and it gives too much variance to things. That's why I'm not prepared at this point to vote for those. Like I said, I'd love to have, whoever it is down at the DPW is doing this, whether it's Pete Thurber or Andy Carr, go through and say, check, 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 check. It calculates out to an 18% reduction or abatement based on what they've submitted. And it's not going to get that, it's clearly not going to get that subjective, but it's got to be near that.
I can talk about that
Yeah,
because it was more complicated,
Oh, I'm sure it was.
and we dumbed it down to say just these types of things for that reason. The reality is we'll probably have to hire somebody who knows more about stormwater runoff BMPs than, I mean, Andy Carr is a great engineer, but he's not a stormwater BMP specialist.
No.
And so that's why we're charging an application fee to have some money to have somebody come out and actually review the applications and do it. I told you, it's
See,
not gonna be
Stephen,
easy.
my response to that would be, first of all, I'd rather hire somebody to write it up once than hire somebody in perpetuity to review annual, or review these proposals or requests as they come in. If you have a criteria, you have a criteria. So,
But again, I think the policies are based on existing best practices with other stormwater utilities. Ty and Bond wrote this for us, and I think we distributed it a few weeks ago anyway. But Ty and Bond really, one of the reasons why it took a while is because they were out researching best management practices, and it's something we've never dealt with this before either, and it is not uncomplicated. We went through and you saw all the red lines and blue lines to try and figure out what really works for us with the organization we have. I don't think you're going to find a perfect credit policy that will capture that. I think that this is as good as we can do. I'll tell you, if Mario Maz was sitting there, he would tell you he has concerns about the department's ability to really effectively analyze these things. But to say, if you cover one, and we struck that mode of analysis, but if you manage 1 inch of runoff, then you get 10%. If it's 2 inches of runoff, I mean, there's just no way to effectively measure that.
Well,
that we possess.
I hear you, Stephen, but I guess I'm bothered by the fact that, we just had the fire chief say, look, we need to be able to assess these standby recovery costs based on what, running a government policies by objectivity is very difficult. You get decrees of they're being treated differently from whether they're right or not. Perception.
I feel like somebody said that emphatically earlier about being gray, not black and white.
And I acknowledge that there is no necessarily black and white, but we're just throwing this out as gray and not even trying to create any criteria. I mean, for example,
Hold on, that's not
if I took
accurate.
10%, let's take for an example, okay? I happen to know that they make this material, it's an open grading material, you can literally put it on lawns, and you can turn your parking lot into you put grass seed and all this stuff, and yet you can park on it because it's a heavy grading material. So if a church came in town and said, we've now got this in our parking lot, we spent $50,000 doing this thing, we want a total abatement because all the rainwater comes through it.
That's addressed in here.
What?
That's in here.
But it doesn't say the amount to which they get an
Up
abatement.
to 50%.
But maybe that's not, but shouldn't it be based on the amount of the region, the area that they do? I mean, shouldn't they get an abatement for all the space that they've now made permeable instead of impermeable?
The reality is, though, to measure, I mean, that's kind of how many angels can dance on the head of a pin type analysis, and that's why, and the other thing, Mark, is stormwater management isn't this, huge, diverse portfolio of techniques for stormwater management. They're listed right here. There aren't that many tools in the toolbox for managing stormwater, and so if someone engages in it, they should get some kind of credit for it, but not 100%, because not all of them are 100% effective, because there are going to be rain events, but that same thing, it's not going to absorb all the rain in an inch an hour of rainfall, and rainfall is going to spill into our system, so you can't, it's not fair to the system to give 100% abatement. And I hear everything you're saying. I think this covers it more than what you're saying.
Right.
Is all. And like I said, you weren't here at the last meeting.
Right.
It wasn't the last packet. But
Okay.
listen, one of the reasons why it didn't get here more quickly, I'll take responsibility for, is that it is complicated. We spent a lot of time going back and forth on it. And it was tough to decide how to approach this. And quite honestly, Ty and Bond took a while to get it to us because they were trying to find existing best practices for policies that fit. They know us now from doing the bylaw, and they wanted something that fit the bylaw. And they did a good job, but we still made a bunch of changes because we still didn't think they had it really as good a fit as it could be for not only our community, like how are we built out, but also what is our DPW's capability to do this. And and like I said, it's a talented department, but this is a whole new territory for us.
Yeah, and this is like a preliminary step. Marie?
There are two things that concern me about it. One is that we already, when we designed the stormwater utility, gave a break to the institutions and the large properties. And now we're giving them a further break of 50%, which is, I think, a huge number, because what we're dealing with is not with future damage, but we have all these million-dollar drainage projects that we're dealing with in town that these properties, most of the properties have been pouring into the system. So I'm a little concerned about the 50%. offer, and I think that we have to look and make sure that it's actual things that are going to make a difference rather than just attempts or Band-Aids on making difference to get that big of a discount. So I guess I'm looking at the measurement issue too. The other is the educational piece. I think that it's all nice to say, oh, well, we're going to teach kids and college students that they have to watch their drainage projects, but I don't think it really helps our problems in town. I would like to see a aspect to it where an educational project that has an actual project that they create in town, whether it's, building something in the conservation area that retains water, especially if you're talking about Bay Path University as our educational institution, rather than just say, include it in your curriculum, do something to really mitigate in order to get the 50% or whatever, or is that 100%? Is the educational 100%? Because what we were hoping to do with the stormwater utility is really spread out the cost throughout the community. So that's why I'd like you to look at those two sections again.
So we've looked at them a lot,
Okay.
and what I've said is community education is an important part of MS4. Okay, that's a requirement of MS4. One of the reasons why we're doing this whole thing is MS4. Community education is a core component. What this does, and I agree with you, it seems a little, but we're the primary beneficiaries of the credit. The town is. What it says
Bay Path
is
University is too.
maybe they may not do, it may not fit with their core requirements, and it's not forever. It's 10%, and it's for 5 years. You get it one time. And what we're trying to do is incentivize Bay Path or the school district to create educational programs that will fulfill that requirement we're going to have for education as a part of MS4 without us having to create a new program of our own. Let the educators do the education, and they get a little credit for doing that. That's the thought behind that. So, and that's the one part of this, which is why it's only 10%. That's the one part of this that isn't about how much water is going into the storm drain. That's the other administrative part of MS4 that we need to comply with. In terms of the BMPs, and we can go around. I don't really have great answers for you on it, but all I know is you want to create an incentive. The goal of MS4, one of the other goals besides education, is trying to limit the amount of storm water that goes into the storm water system. Okay, so to minimize the need for those $1 million drainage projects, those outfalls and the dingles and all the other things we've gotten engaged in that are big money. If you don't give properties, especially ones with large amounts of impervious surface, some kind of incentive to manage it on site, there is no incentive for them to do that.
Don't
if
they
just
have
pay
to
their bill.
require to do it
No,
these
no,
days?
wait. I disagree. If I'm getting a bill for $800 a year, there's an incentive for me to spend $1,000 to mitigate that down to, the bill in itself is the incentive, Stephen. It doesn't have to be a carrot on top of the bill. I mean, if I was Willie Ross School or some other school and I'm getting a bill now for stormwater utility, I got a heck of an incentive to spend money to mitigate it.
Yeah, I agree. Especially if you're given examples specifically to your property that you can, you can build this in. This may cost you, $100,000, but you never have to pay this tax for 50 years, But depending on the size of the project and the longevity of the institution, some people might say, this is worth investing in, and we would do this in our area. And again, like an educational institution could say, this is part of our ecological approach to teaching students about being sustainable, and looking at how to make this a better world. And so we're going to build this thing, and it's going to deal with rainwater effectively and runoff, and so that's...
Which is something we're required to do in the community.
Yeah.
And again, so it's really, I mean, how do you need sort of tailor-made projects for specific groups or organizations, so it's hard to know, we can't put together a document that's going to spell all this out. That's So,
I don't
yeah.
think that we're ready to vote on this.
No.
Richard's been away, Mark wasn't here. I mean, I've had this for a couple of weeks, so I've had time to look at it, but not many other people have. So there's,
I agree.
I think that Mark.
Or if, just vote on the policy, except don't include the BMPs.
I don't want to include the educational part either.
Yeah.
So vote on the policy, but leave out sections 3, 4, and 5?
Okay.
I mean,
I just request the next time, if we're gonna have this on the next agenda, if you could, if we're looking at the Dwight Street project, if we could look and see what they're building there will affect their stormwater utility. Because I'm thinking that most people now, when they do new developments, they have to build that stuff in. And if they build that stuff in, where does that leave them? How does this practically affect them, the credit? Do they need to apply for the BBP? Does it automatically slide them in? I don't understand how new projects fit into that. So I was just asking if you could give us a breakdown the next time on what you estimate would happen with
I
the
mean,
new one.
no, the answer is I can't do that. That's a civil engineer that has to do that. I mean, it's a very specific scientific thing. And so the site plan, it's a part of site plan review. And so they did talk about it at the planning board with their site plan, and they do have on-site stormwater management.
So you
How they
can't tell
calc-
me where their fee would be? 50% less, 40% less for 5 years, 10 years? There's just no way of
it's-
knowing without
Right, okay,
hiring.
Oh, I see what you,
Yeah.
Here's an example.
is that on the list?
It's what on the list?
The one that had the top 10, did they put them on, did they calculate for them as built? They may not have. So for new ones, yes,
Mm-hmm.
but for something like the shops,
No, I'm talking about the new ones that come in.
right? But what this is for pre-existing, is to incentivize people who are pre-existing to install stormwater mitigation measures on their existing property, and the fee isn't probably high enough to stimulate the level of investment to tear up your parking lot and put in an underground system. Shops is a good example. We would spend a lot of time working on the design and the new expansion, new parking lot. They have an underground stormwater management system that doesn't now handle the flow, because I think the groundwater table is higher than I thought it was. So they connected to our stormwater system. So could they get, they spent a bunch of money building this system, but it doesn't 100% effectively keep stormwater out of our system. So I would never recommend giving them 100% stormwater credit, but, how much of it is being kept in versus not? I mean, you have to go under, you can't figure that out. You just have to basically do it, kind of guesstimate, based on what we have.
Yeah.
And honestly, I could have, the best thing to probably do is have Tracy Adamski from Ty and Bond come here and have this discussion with you.
Well, I guess, can you answer my question then? If the new construction down on Dwight Road, they're not eligible to file for a BBP because they are.
of course they are. Why would they?
Well, because
how-
you were just, I was trying to translate what Stephen just told to me, or it has nothing to do with them.
No, what I'm saying is, yes, I could calculate what they would qualify for, and I'll tell you that I don't know which of the list. I think it's not a bioretention area. I think they have infiltration basins and trenches, I think. But they have on-site, oh no, I'm sorry, detention basin, yeah, they have some of the stuff. But they are managing stormwater on-site. So they would be eligible for 50% credit.
Okay, and that goes on for how long?
5 years.
5 years.
5 years. And then they would kick back up to the full fee?
Full fee.
Okay.
But it's for somebody like, St. Mary's Church, who has zero on-site stormwater management, I'm guessing. How do we get them to manage their stormwater on-site so it doesn't go into our system? How do we incentivize them to do that? Again, I keep going back to that. You say, why are we doing this? Why not just the fee? Because the fee isn't high enough to really incentivize the level of investment, and we're supposed to be making this investment and incentivizing people to stop contributing to the stormwater system, and because it goes from ostensibly St. Mary's puts sand or salt down the parking lot, well, that ends up in the Connecticut River. And that's the whole point of this.
So that's interesting, because I never really thought about, so like, when I see new construction, and it has, this lawn that seems to create like a pond
To swell.
just for the rainwater, and then it disappears. That's really just, that's what they're doing that for, to keep it on site.
Yeah, I mean, there are requirements now where you have to do some of that.
Yeah.
But for pre-existing, you know, the water that goes into the system, whether they're building new or whether it's existing, it's still runoff.
Yeah.
And it's not about generating revenue, it's about limiting runoff. Like I said, I said, when I presented with Tracy at a conference, I said I was a science major in college, but it was political science, so I really am not expert enough to explain this stuff. I'm happy to have her come here. We felt like we came up with the most approachable credit policy we possibly could, taking something that's extremely complex. Evidently, we missed the mark.
Well,
So
it's
tell me
just-
if you want
it's hard.
Tracy to come here, tell me if you, I mean, what do you need next from us to look at this? The bylaw says that the select board shall adopt, right?
Right. Town manager shall develop, but it shall be approved by the select board.
Well, I think Mark, I'd be interested to see if we have some sort of, like you said, bioretention area. How much does that get you? Is it an idea, or do you look at the total system? I mean, who's analyzing this? Is it gonna be someone who we pay $200 for, or is there markers that people can understand how many points they get for each thing? I guess that's how they do it these days, are points, and you add the points up, and if you get over 10, you get, I don't know.
But there is a statement in here that it's based upon the percent of impervious surface that's being treated by the best practice. So if that, whatever they're doing is only treating 50% of the impervious surface, then their abatement or their credit is going to be 50% of the 50% that's allowable.
But Paul, what if what they're doing only removes 50% of the water over that 50%? There's nothing in here that says it would be 50%. That's what I'm looking for, something that
Right.
says it's proportional to the amount of the water that you remove, stormwater you target to remove, over the amount of of area that you're targeting, and nowhere does it say that.
And I think that was in there originally when we got into this, treats 1 inch of water runoff, da, da, da.
Yeah,
And we're like,
Right.
This is an easier way to measure that for really, it's, yeah, I mean, I think we're kind of overthinking this a little bit.
I'm not trying to get into the how many inches of water that, gee, you can handle a
Yes, you
one.
are,
No,
though.
because
But you are.
what I'm not trying to say is you can handle a 1 inch an hour rain, but you can't handle a 1.5 inch per hour of water of rain, and therefore, I'm just saying, by square feet, how much did you treat, and how much of the, how effective is it intended to be? And if it's intended to be, 95% effective over 95% of the storms, that's good enough for me. But if it's only 10% of your property, people need to understand they're not gonna get a 10% rebate, because it's only 10% of their property that they're.
Right, but we make it about area. That's what this does.
And
Right.
And that is the simplest way for our organization to review and enforce this credit policy.
Yeah, the area of impervious surface, because, from year to year, the amount of water that comes off property is gonna be different, and you can't say, well, this was a tough year for you, you owe us more money. I mean, that wouldn't make a
All
lot
you
of
need
sense.
to, all you need to do, all the DPW needs to do to determine the value of the credit, which again is only up to 50%, even if they're at 100% impervious surface, is use a tape measure and look at this list and see if the thing that they have is on this list, and then use a tape measure.
Okay.
And that's what we really want out of this, is ease of use.
But it doesn't address the effectiveness of what they do. It's just, they're doing something. They're doing something over 50% of their area, and therefore they qualify for 50% of this abatement. When in fact, if what they're doing is a marginal, if what they're doing is porous pavement versus leach catch basements, maybe each of those have a different percentage, and they ought to be put in there. That's all my point is.
They do, but Mark, they do it by reference. The effectiveness is done by referring it back to the handbook from 2008. So that's why you go back to the handbook, and I've never read the handbook, but I'm guessing the handbook has a discussion about each of those things and their the performance specs, I'm gonna guess are in that handbook.
Okay, Marie, you had a question?
Yeah, I think Mark brought up a really good point in the beginning, and that was the process. Okay, so we're talking about 50%, possibly huge amount of money for some developers or some institutionals in town. So if they disagree with what the person down in DPW, what is the appeal process in doing that? So I think we should probably set something. Maybe you say you can appeal it for an extra $200 and a third person come in, but I know down the line, there's going to be a question about appeal process. So I want you to think about that before we make the final decision.
I just don't, I don't feel like we're on the same page on what this is supposed to do and what it's supposed to do and what it actually does, which is what it's supposed to do. And I think we're looking at this like it's a different kind of policy than it is. So what I'll do is, I think you're right. I'll get Tracy here at a meeting, and she can kind of explain it, because we don't do this. This is based on where people who are doing this effectively, what they're doing. We're not gonna reinvent the wheel here. That's the whole point. And all we wanna do is make sure this wheel fits on our vehicle, our organization. And we think, based on the information we get from Ty and Bond and our knowledge of our organization, and I'm not saying don't change it. I'm just saying we're kind of going off in directions that kind of belie what this is supposed to be.
My concern is that we've created a bureaucracy that we're apparently, I say apparently, unable to administer, other than in the most general of terms, because it's not our area of expertise. And that's problematic, because if we created the bureaucracy, it's incumbent upon us to figure out either how to administer it or make it so it is not a bureaucracy anymore. And that's my opinion.
I know, but I think what you're not hearing me on is you don't have to have it be that specific to have it be effective. There's not only one way to do this.
Well,
To administer the program, there's different ways to do it.
Yeah, but what you're telling us now, every time we make a suggestion or concern, you say, but this is we're just being slapped back and said, this is the way it is and this is the best way to do it. And you don't understand, I don't understand why this can't be a dialogue for us to consider and talk about. And I just feel like there's no dialogue here. You're just angry that we're bringing up suggestions and concerns.
No, but it's just the suggestions, an appeal thing is fine.
No, you just threw it in the air saying, you just don't understand, Marie, what we're trying to do here.
But you said it's gonna be a huge amount of money. None of this adds up to a huge amount of money.
Well, I thought some of our institutions were paying thousands of dollars every year.
Right now, we have such a small fee for 1 unit of impervious surfaces. I mean, we're not covering the full amount, and that amount that we're charging is expected to grow every year as we cover more and more of the budget. So right now, are they paying a lot of money?
So what is the shops paying?
What will the shops pay?
Well, the town of, the high school would have the largest fee of $300 per month.
$300 a month, so that's $3,600 a year.
$3,600.
Right, at the small rate that we're paying. I'm not quite sure how the shops are identified on here. We have 690 Bliss Road,
That's probably them.
$211 per month.
Well, if the fees are that much, maybe we shouldn't even institute it at this time.
Well,
Maybe we shouldn't have any of them.
so let me say this, farcical though it may seem, but the obligation was, we have to prepare it, we have to bring it to you.
Yeah,
You just adopted a credit for the residential credits. You fulfilled your obligation in the bylaw. We can be done.
No. But Stephen, I gotta tell you, I think that the fact that it's extremely complex, the fees are little, is no reason that we should say, so don't worry if this is just cosmic and approximate and not pinned down. It's a fee. It's a fee of even significant consequence to some people, and I think we owe it to them to let them know of, how we go about creating abatements, and alternatively, have no abatements.
But, and I'm not arguing anything,
But-
I'm trying to argue suggestions. What I'm saying is, this does that. Let me analogize. A TV set, to bring a TV set to the recycling center is, I don't know, $25, whatever we raised it to. It doesn't say TV sets 10 to 25 inches, $30, TV sets 50 to, whatever. It's just, you have a TV, it costs this much. there's a high level, I believe, of I say non-specificity, but the data, it's hard to, there's not meters on storm drains, Mark, is what I'm trying to say, and that's where there has to be some guesswork involved in developing the credit policy, because there's guesswork and you know this as an engineer. Do you know how they figure out what the runoff is going to be? The calculator, not by sitting out there and looking at it.
Well, I
And
understand.
that's how the abatement is figured out.
But the abatement is, we are measuring the number of square feet of impervious surfaces, right? Okay.
In certain cases, sure.
Okay, but that's the basis behind the fee, is amount of impervious surface,
No, I don't think so. Isn't it, aren't we taking,
based on equivalent residential units.
So, no, but what I think, and this is where the handbook by reference does this, and this is where I think there's the gap in understanding on this, that is really what I'm trying to get to. It's not that I don't think we can't do this a different way than I presented, it's that I just want to make sure we're on the same page how we're thinking about this. The handbook, like I said, I'm gonna guess has the specifications in it, where it says leaching catch basins can collect X number of inches of runoff in X number of hours, or something like that. So you take the page from the handbook that says, this is what the value of that technique is, of that device, of that structure, and this is what it's worth. We don't go out there and measure the rainwater, and that's the whole point, Mark. It's all done on paper in advance, and then we go out and verify that they've built the thing and that it is of a certain size, but we're not going out and verifying how much water is going into it.
I understand that, but Stephen, I'll use that example of the leaching catch basins, okay? Some of these remediations are more effective than others. Shouldn't they get a different level of abatement?
That's up to you. Now, that's a suggestion, Marie, that I think is fine. If you want to stagger the abatement if you want to, and that's where I'd say, let's get Tracy in here and ask her that question.
I just finished saying, let's give it points,
Right.
and you
that's
jumped
what-
down my throat.
Right, because what I'm gonna do is, if I can do anything and get the same level of abatement, I'm gonna do the cheapest thing, which may be the least effective. When in fact, that's not fair, that somebody who puts in something that's very, very effective, and somebody who puts something in less effective, treating the same number of square feet, will both be given the same level of abatement over the same number of years, when one's far more effective. Now, I'm not gonna worry that this one will catch 2 inches an hour and this one 1 inch an hour. I just know that the handbook says this is more effective than that, and therefore this ought to get, and yeah, if it's points or however you do it, but I thought you'd just sit here and say, not all abatements are equal, and somebody needs to know the rules. So if you want to maximize your abatement, here's what you might want to consider doing, as opposed to pick whatever you want to do and go for it. I just think that there's got to be some kind of a guide here that tells people what they're going to get for what investment they make.
Okay.
Let me Google the handbook, because I think it does that, Mark. And
Well-
that's why that reference is there.
But I think,
But our policy doesn't say, and you will be given an abatement adjusted based on the handbook. It doesn't say any of that. It just says, here are systems you can use.
But then the ultimate abatement is up to 50% based on the number of impervious surface that you're treating.
But not the effectiveness of that treatment.
But that's not the unit of measure in this world.
But,
I don't know how you figure that out.
no,
How
but,
do you monitor it?
It's not, Mark, that's the
But he's
effectiveness of it
saying
is
the
a-
handbook-
it's a
the
time,
handbook
it's a
will
time
tell
and
you.
volume, it's a space and volume thing, not an effectiveness thing. Effectiveness is not a unit of measure in stormwater management. It's volume, it's
right,
volume.
right. And so what you're gonna say is a leaching catch basin can handle a volume of X, and a wet basins can handle a volume of Y, and if one's lower than the other, then the one that's higher ought to get a somewhat more of a, that's part of the problem. If I'm alone on this, forget about it, but that's the challenge you're gonna get by people saying, why should I make any kind of a significant investment that really impacts the amount of stormwater runoff when I'm gonna get the same abatement if I do almost nothing?
okay, so.
Do the least effective thing.
If it sounds like we're moving in the direction of having someone from Ty and Baum come and look at the plan, which you spent a lot of time developing, and they could answer some of the things so we could get to a point where this could be voted on, that would be helpful. And maybe we should all get our own copies of or a link at least to the
Done.
manual. We're all set.
Done.
We're all got our links to the manual, we have our draft, we'll review it all, and we'd be glad to put it on the agenda for next meeting, if that sounds good. Okay,
And then the select board is the hearing board if people are not satisfied with
oh, we are,
denied abatements.
okay,
Oh, okay. So we're hearing,
all right.
Right, and that's right in the bylaw.
okay.
So next, we could go to the select board town manager goals, which we had on the agenda a couple of times. We haven't been able to get to it. So we do have some time to get it tonight, I guess. So if you want to pull up the sheet,
Can I add, get through a meeting without throwing shoes at each other or something like that, just to,
I'd love that.
sure.
I think for the $5 that somebody's gonna say we gotta scrap the whole thing. But that's just me. No, you spent too much time.
no, honestly, I actually, Bill, I actually agree with you 100%. The residential abatements are easy, it's a light lift, it's a feel-good thing, it'll help a small number of people. We were given a directive, we talked, when we were developing this bylaw, about finding a way to develop credits for non-residential properties, because they're the ones that are, they're the only ones that actually get billed on area. Everybody else gets billed just one fee. We talked a lot about it, there was support to do it, we tried to figure out the best way, and if it's just not worth doing for any one particular payer, or let's get familiar with how the system works,
Yeah.
and then add it later when the fees go up, I'm totally
Yeah.
fine with that. Like I said, by voting on you've already fulfilled your obligations to the bylaw.
Right.
Oh, I think
Marie.
it's, when you
Yeah.
talk about, I don't know how much, let's say St. Andrews or First Church will be paying, I think it's worth it to us to look at it. Because again, what I asked was, what are the actual ramifications for individual properties? So if you're talking about $15 a year, fine. If you're talking about maybe $500 a year, then we might want to go ahead and consider that for some of the nonprofits in town, so.
But it's gonna be, it depends on what thing they do. You can't answer that now. I mean, you could say if everybody got 50%, like if everybody just got well, that's what we did. If everybody get the max, well, the top 10 gets the max, what would that be worth to us? But that's different than saying, what's it worth specifically to St. Andrews? Because we don't know what they're doing. We don't know what their plan is. They would need to get a civil engineer in here to draw a plan of what they want to do, and we could evaluate that. I could do that evaluation for Mike Crowley's for the Dwight Road project. I wasn't saying we couldn't do that. It's that's not really what the credit policy is intended for that we're trying to get through here. Because he'll get 50% because he's required to keep it all on site. It's the ones who have zero on site
Yeah.
right now. That's
The older properties
yeah.
in town,
And so non-conforming.
which will make a difference to some of the nonprofit small schools like Willie Ross or
Yeah.
the older churches. But, Bill, you're right, if it's just $100 for the whole year, no one's gonna bother the $200 application fee.
Right.
So I have no idea.
Install a $200,000 catch basin.
Yeah.
Yeah, and, well, the thing is that they're gonna have to hire someone to come in and, figure out what kind of catch basin, where they could put it.
It'd be 10
and that's
grand
gonna
into
cost them
engineering.
a ton of money. I mean, if the town could say, okay, for this Willie Ross school, look at this, boom, if you did this or this, we'll give you 3 options, and then they chose one, I mean, that would be a lot easier for these small, because they don't wanna have to hire consultants to
But
tell
that's-
them what to do.
I do want to go back though, but that's why the educational component
Yeah.
part of this is important and not a
Yeah.
throwaway thing, because they could look at the educational materials that have been prepared, and maybe there are, I'll say demonstration projects because that's a little complicated, but maybe they do go to a seminar that the high school puts on as a senior class project to talk about measuring effectiveness of stormwater as a kind of new way of thinking about it or something like that.
Yeah.
And they could get that free education
Right,
before they made the decision to hire an engineer.
and then put it, or even just say, yeah, this is what we want, we just want to hire you, come in and do this. So that's, hopefully we'll get to that point, so, that makes sense. All right, so in terms of the You've got some suggestions here for the goals, and the first, number one, looks in order, so why don't we move to number two, exploring new revenue opportunities. And you have a comment here. Shouldn't it include
Yeah, it's
comments
a
about?
spillover comment. I don't think I updated it.
You what?
I think that was a comment from last year, like an
Oh.
editorial comment from last year.
Expenditures, reductions, efficiencies. And then, we have a suggestion to include about OPEB trust funds. We've already completed.
Well, are we looking at new goals? Are we looking to see where we were in the old goals? I'm confused. What do we, because like, I have questions on one,
Okay,
but are we looking prospectively or?
These are FY19 goals. Last year, we adopted FY18 goals.
Oh, so we're
These
now
goes in-
talking about 19 goals.
Right.
So we're looking in the future.
This
Okay.
is for the GFOA budget. I mean, it's for ourselves, but this is really to fulfill a requirement for the GFOA budget document. And so a lot of these are things that we know through the budgeting process we are going to be engaged in.
Okay, all right, so I have questions on
right.
one. Can we go
Uh,
back
number
to
one.
one?
Sure,
So
no,
we
we
don't
talk
lose
about number
one?
one. No.
Okay,
We're
so
working.
one of the things we did was that innovation fund. We still have, right? Last year, it just got spent on the solar for the DPW site. Isn't that where you spent the innovation fund money?
I think part of that, yeah.
Yeah. And so what are your plans for this year?
Well, one of the things we've identified, and truthfully, I'm kind of holding on, I usually try and hold off until year end, or close to year end, in case a great idea comes up. And then we can retrospectively look back and say, that's something we did innovatively. And I don't mean like, as John said, throw a dart. We retained a firm called Metatrol to help us with workers' comp and IOD cases. That's something we'd never done before, and I said, this really could be an innovation fund thing, because this is an innovative way to reduce cost by virtue of reduced sick time or overtime and things like that. Right now, it's in our legal expenses budget, as you saw from the packet. But that's one I've kind of identified, but I didn't fall in love with it as an idea, and so if there's another innovative thing that we can do between now and June, we may do it, but I also think that, the fee for Metatrol exceeds the innovation fund.
But hold it. Again, I guess I'm lost. I thought this was projects from July 1st on.
Right, no, I'm talking about the FY18 current innovation
Oh,
fund.
you're talking about, okay, because I was talking about what you wanted to do for next year.
I don't know yet.
Oh, yeah, so we're listing the goals for next year. Do
I
you have
thought
any
the
ideas?
purpose of the innovation fund, I thought, was when something kind of falls out of the sky that's a really good idea, but it's not in the budget, I have an innovation fund we can apply, because it would be an
Oh.
innovative thing.
See, I thought it was different. I thought it was thinking up new ways of doing things and then giving it a pilot or test try of
But
it.
sometimes we don't know that until something emerges, like an opportunity.
So you don't have anything,
I don't think what's great about that fund is I don't need to have something now when something happens, like identifying this firm, which we did in the fall, and saying, geez, this could really save us some money, this is innovative. If we don't have another appropriation, let's use the innovation fund to offset this cost, because it is innovative.
and did it save us money? Do we know?
Not yet.
We don't know yet. Okay. And then the other thing is, you have down here, evaluate policy of allowing retirees to join health insurance group. So we haven't done that yet, but I'd love that to be done
We
this
have.
year. You have, because we have the select board policy was never brought in front of us. I kept saying, let's bring that back in.
What's select board policy?
We have a select board policy on when retirees can come in
It's a-
on the health insurance
It's the
plan.
town manager policy.
No, it's a select board policy.
You sure about that?
Yeah,
Because I know,
positive.
well, the town manager approves it.
Town manager approves it, but that's not even on the, I know you've been approving it, but the select board policy's conflicting, and I said we have to bring it back up, and
Well, we have the draft of.
what are you guys doing that's different? Because I know up till now, people can jump on whenever they want to. They could have left towns working for us 15, 20 years ago, and they can come back and say, we decided we're gonna take the retirement health insurance, right?
Are you gonna address it, or?
Go ahead.
No, yeah, they were gonna have a grandfather phase where those employees or retirees, already who have been approved that, would continue. Current employees would have a year to make a decision, and after that, there's no re-entering it. So there's kind of a graduated phase of
So
that.
we are moving towards
Correct.
shutting down that all.
Correct.
Yeah, I recommend you pull the select board policy, because there is one sitting out there right now that actually, I think, says goes in front of the select board, and I had pointed out that we gotta bring it in front of the board to get that corrected. So, especially if we've had a big change on it.
By the way, it's not gonna save us any money.
It's not, what, doesn't it save us on the liability?
No.
Because we have less
I mean-
potential OPEBs.
Yeah, it might save a little bit, because those who can re-enter, I'm sure an actuary takes something into consideration. And that's for the OPEB, but yeah, it will save something, because we're not allowing people to re-enter. So, I mean, there has to be some savings, but
But it's not gonna lower premiums or anything like
it's
that.
not, you're not gonna see a
premiums, but-
huge impact. I mean, it's gonna be, I mean, there'll be an impact, but it's not anything significant that you're ever gonna recognize.
And right now, we are paying 50%.
That is correct.
And that's based on,
50%
is based on statute, right?
Yes,
So the only way we can go down to less is if the statute changes.
correct.
Stephen, just clarification. These goals are GFOA goals?
No, the requirement to have goals like this is a part of the GFOA
Oh.
budget document. We've done it for the last few years.
So how do you see these goals? Do you see these as the goals by which you will be judged at the end of the year?
Well, these goals go in as kind of the overarching
Right, yeah,
broader
yeah.
select board goals. Then these
Yeah.
are kind of, when you look at below the goals, it's goals and accomplishments. And so the things that we got done will go in as accomplishments, and things we didn't get to get carried, like some of the ones that are on here are carryovers because we weren't able to get them done in the fiscal year. Yeah, I mean, I think it's fair to say that some of these can be judged, for performance evaluation to be judged. I mean, some of them may not be within my control, but as long as I can demonstrate that I put forward an effort to try and get these done. Some of the stuff we were already doing, but you have to remember, this document's been around for a month or so. So,
Around
when
for a
I
year
put
and a
these,
month,
so when I, like permit banner signs on town recreational facilities, that was a goal, because it could generate revenue, and then
yeah. Right.
we had an issue with the First Amendment because the proposal that was put forward by the person interested in this wanted to control content.
Okay.
So that's not gonna be a goal that I'm gonna accomplish this year, because, I mean, I think that the First Amendment issues we know are not gonna be resolved in the near future.
Okay, well, here's my issue, is that I see a town manager's, evaluation having three components that I have had a tough time fitting in here. One is budget. I'll use two segments of budget. One is developing the budget, and the other is administering the budget successfully. The second, beside budget, is personnel management. Your job is to hire and manage people. And the third is communications. And I don't see where those three broad categories fit in here if we're going to use these as criteria for evaluation. I think budget, personnel management, and communications. So, and I understand that this is a document different from that. That's why I started by saying, how do we include that stuff? And then maybe it's a rhetorical question.
I mean, we have a evaluation form we've been using. I could try and tie some of these items to the evaluation form that we've been using. And so if you just say you have three things.
Well, I just have three things. Somebody else may have three other things.
And I
That's
guess
part
what
of
I'd say,
the
Mark, is I can't do it that way. I gotta go with what the board as a group has adopted as the format.
Right, and I'm surprised that the board doesn't see budgeting and personnel management as key evaluation factors.
I mean, what would you say, but again, I think each of these goals, or not all of them, but many of these goals have components of budgeting, personnel management, and communications. I mean, that's involved, budgeting, personnel management, communications is how I do all of this stuff.
Well, I think you could recommend some goals under management or budget. You know, as you're saying, where is it gonna fit?
Yeah, where is
The
it fit?
improved use of cardiograph in number one, I mean, that could be a management tool, can be considered one.
But overall, Marie, my intent is, you know, we put together a $62 million budget.
Yeah.
At the end of the year, you know, how well did we do? How many times did the town manager come back to us and say, you know, the budget, we missed in one line item and had to move things in or out, or we missed in 80 line items that we had to move things in and out. That's a difference of performance, I think.
But do you
know.
wanna add number 7, budget?
Well, but, I mean, you
Budget
can add
goals?
budget, but then, like I said, you know, is personnel management and the performance of subordinates, you know, how do we, I mean, you know, Stephen hires, he manages department heads. Now, ultimately, the department head performances are your responsibility because you hire, you know, and administer the department heads. But if the X department goes to pieces in the coming year, it's not covered here. How do we, you know, evaluate based on that? And I'm not saying it will, but alternatively, if every department runs smooth as a clock, how do we give you
Well, is
credit for that?
performance different from goals? Yeah.
Yeah, you're kind of
Mark.
inventing a problem that doesn't actually exist right now.
Yeah.
Maybe, but maybe not.
Well, no, but Mark, I mean,
I'm fine.
not for nothing, every time we have a goals discussion, you do this.
Because I don't believe these are good goals.
Right, but the board does, because we
But then-
approve this thing, and
fine.
every time it's every year. And I don't know what the answer, I've run out, honestly, Mark,
I know, and
I've run out of
I've run out of
answers. We agreed on this
frustration
before, Mark.
because-
We've used this 2 or 3 times, and every year you go back, and it's not what
Because
you
it
want.
doesn't evaluate your performance, it evaluates your activities.
But this is not my performance evaluation, this is a component of it. And
Fine.
honestly, I think I said I was gonna be on the road for the next meeting, which is during school vacation week. Why don't you guys have at it for goals then? And I don't need to be here, and if it's,
You know, I just,
this is the year we've done, this is how we've done this. I presented it how we did it last
Right.
year, and it's not sufficient.
all right.
Because I don't see everybody falling in love with it,
Okay.
Stephen, except for you.
okay.
I don't see anybody falling in love with this thing.
I don't, right now, I just want to get things done, and get things done means get stuff on the list and move through it.
But then what you're doing is lifting things below the line, Marie, and not things above the line.
Well,
And it's
I'll-
above the line that's important,
No,
I
the
think.
important thing is to get things done. So, I have a question. You say you're going to improve the use of cardiograph for performance at DPW. What is your plan for that this year?
So one of the things we have not done well is use cartograph to come up with, you know, reporting on performance metrics and things like that. And I think it's a deficiency in our software, but I also think it's we just don't have the personnel we have. Don't, you know, we do a reasonable job entering the data, but then taking the data and really painting the picture of performance is not something we do. And I've had some fairly pointed conversations with the DPW management about our lack of ability to do that. Part of it is the software we have, this version of it, doesn't have customized reports. So the reports, the generic ones, don't really tell you very much. And I want to develop, maybe that's something for the Innovation Fund, but I want to develop a more specific way to implement that. And it was on last year's list too. The problem is, it's a complicated thing. We don't have the in-house capacity to really do it right now, and it gets displaced to cover reports, budgeting. I mean, all the other stuff we do. It's just a task that kind of gets kicked down the road because we don't. It's just not an easy one for us to do in-house.
Yeah, is there a small step you can make towards that? Because
Well,
as you said, it's been sitting here for a while.
The small step is we've been, using the work order system and opening and closing work orders on a more timely basis. We didn't do any of it a few years ago.
But do you think we've got to get rid of this software?
Maybe, maybe a software change is a part of this, but that's a big process doing that. And maybe that's it. And maybe the using cartograph is ditching cartograph or something that makes more sense for us. But like I said, we don't have the in-house capacity to evaluate that. As you recall, we got started with the help of the Collins Center. and they laid out some ways of doing it, but you would need somebody like the Collins Center basically on staff full-time, and I don't, again, it's worth it to do it better, but not for a full-time benefited position to bring on to do it better. Right.
Do we have someone in the town who really is a specialist in terms of statistics and looking at? No. Because that's really, you know, you get data, and you need someone who can really crunch it and manipulate
Yeah,
it. Because it
just-
sounds like the program doesn't do it, so you'd have to have someone who could do it manually, and we don't have anyone like
Not that
that.
I'm aware of. This is why it hasn't been
Yeah.
done.
Excuse me, Tom, I know we could talk about these goals all night. We have two, I think we need action items here. One on the, do we need to take an action on the diff capture tonight in terms of taxes?
Not necessarily tonight, but in the near future.
How about the wording for the town
That would
election?
have to be done by the next meeting. I think it has to be done 35 days prior to the election.
I mean, if we want to move to those.
Go to the
that's a
new
good idea.
budget
So,
business.
yeah, I'd like to get through the agenda. I mean, that's, so how do we want to close the discussion on the goals? Do we, people have would forward any other ideas,
Why don't we,
Stephen?
could I recommend something?
Yeah,
Why don't we do the other two items, and then come back to the goals and keep banging our heads till the lights go off?
okay. So we would go to approve the ballot questions next, and new business. And we've
Yeah.
got a copy of
Tom?
those. Yes,
I don't know if you want to just do this as a motion, or, but there's a ballot question that's proposed. I got to tell you, as proposed, I think it's deficient. It says, shall the town of Long Meadow be allowed to exempt from the provisions of Proposition 2.5, so-called the amounts required to pay for the bond issue in order to construct and furnish a new council on aging facility. I think that without including the amount in there, it's a disservice to the
Mark,
people
can I
in
just
town.
add that this is right out of the statute, and this is the way that it has to be.
this is the
This
statute.
is right out of the statute,
Yeah.
exactly right out of the book, the law book.
Is that what we did with
This is
DPW?
exactly how you did it with the DPW.
It's not how we did it with schools.
I would have to say that the vote for, at the election, was at the ballot box was probably done in this fashion.
I remember, because the ballot box, and the schools had 77 million in it. I guarantee you, Paul, it had 77 million on it. Because
I'll
we
take the bet.
were, you'll take the bet? Okay.
Take the vote. Well, he knows the statute.
Did they just commit a
I was
crime?
surprised, so they don't use the word override. Like, that's what
Well,
the.
No, it's exempted from Prop 2.5. I just think this is absurd. That I'm not going to vote for this, because I think it's absurd that people aren't going to know how much money they're voting for. And I know that.
Everyone who walks in there is going to know.
Yeah.
that.
I absolutely don't agree with that, Marie.
They are
I
gonna-
would guarantee you that many of the people walking in there won't know the amount.
Well,
But
the town meeting has to approve an amount, so if they, I can understand them
Right.
not putting two and two together and having it all together.
Right, right.
but There is an amount voted at town meeting. that will set the
I get that. I
precedent.
just think the ballot question ought to restate it for people literally walking in off the street who didn't know what the amount was, so they know what the amount of the override they're voting for.
Is Paul saying it's against the law?
To,
Put the amount in?
I believe that this is exactly how the law requires it,
Yeah.
and I doubt that it can be changed.
Okay, so we need a
Oh.
opinion on it then.
But because the Article 14, wouldn't it have a number in Article 14?
Article 14 has a dollar value, yes.
Yeah, he's saying at the ballot in June. This is the
Yeah, I
only
know
thing
it,
you're
but
going to
at the
see.
at the beginning, you say Article 14 of the 2018 town meeting has a bond authorization for
That's just kind of,
construction.
that's just an introduction.
You can't put a number.
What would be written on the ballot is, shall the town of Long Meadow be allowed to exempt?
Oh, that's all
so
it
on
would
and so
say.
forth.
Okay,
What is in quotations would be, what would be on the ballot.
okay.
Yeah, and we won't know the number before this has to be approved.
Right.
Well, it's the same number that's on the,
That
No,
could
that
change
could
in a
be
floor town
amended.
meeting.
Okay,
well,
all right. I
That's one
move
issue.
to approve the ballot as written.
Okay, do we have a second?
Second?
Okay. And it sounds like it needs to meet this format. I don't know if there's any further discussion. So all those in favor? Okay, opposed? All right. So that's, we can move on from that. The next is the Arbor Day proclamation, and we've gotten a copy of that, and it's great. It goes back
Do you need a
long
vote
time.
on it?
I don't think I don't know. It sounds like I'm gonna sign it. I'm willing to do it. So,
I would vote on it.
Move to approve the Arbor Day proclamation.
Second.
okay. All those in favor? Okay, great. And then the next thing is the diff percent capture vote.
Yeah, as part of the DIF project, a couple things have to happen, and I may have put the horse before the cart by having the budget already done, but regardless, there is a requirement that the select board take a vote on the percent of the incremental taxes that are going to be captured. I'm asking that 100% of those incremental taxes for FY19 minimally be used for the debt service payment that we would be incurring to have the project. I think the good news is that the estimate did come from KRT Appraisals, the outfit that is kind of our third party at this point in time, and they appraised it at just over $4 million, and that's 30% completion. So the good news is it's going to be far more revenue than we had originally estimated. We had originally estimated the building might be about $8 million, and this looks like it's going to be about a $13 million project when all is said and done. But minimally, you do need to vote on that one portion. The 100% is the recommendation of the incremental tax revenues.
Paul, we haven't bonded this,
We have not bonded yet.
so we don't know what the costs are, but you've prepared this pro
I-
forma budget.
Yes.
But that interest and principal in year one is based on,
Principal in year one, we would be able to control. Because again, we can control to some degree the
Right,
debt
right, right.
structure. I would make sure that the principal and interest in year one equates to the 97.4 at the highest, that equates to 97.4 in year one.
but had this building come in for the $8 million, not $13 million, the revenue would have been lower, correct?
Potentially, yes.
Potentially, and we would have scheduled diff payments or bond payments based on that revenue.
Right, but again, understand that this is an estimate of something that's 30% completed.
Right, I'm just trying to say, let's not over capture the money if we don't need to.
I think in the first year, it's key to do 100%. That I think next year, after it is fully developed and we know the true amount, we would be easier, and we're gonna have already developed that payment structure in the debt, we would probably be very easily to match up the percent that is needed at that point in
Well,
time.
this is the whole program, the diff, right? The income from the taxes go to pay for the
Right,
improvements.
right.
So
And if there is extra money within the DIF budget that we're gonna approve at the town meeting, that money reverts back to the general fund. But I'm saying in year one, I'm suggesting that we use the whole amount in year one of that incremental revenue. Year two will be probably a much different story, or, maybe it might be 75%. Based upon evaluation going up to 13 million.
Okay.
So you could redo this at a later point.
This has to be done annually.
Anyway, okay, yeah, this is, yeah.
So, annually I'll be coming in here.
God willing, we'll be able to lower that number.
but I'm going to move the select board to utilize 100% of the Dwight Road Improvement District's incremental tax revenues to be utilized in establishing the FY 2019 District Improvement Fund financing budget.
Okay, do we have a second? Okay, any further discussion? All those in favor? Okay, great.
Before we go back to the goals, there's something on the subcommittee that we needed to bring up.
Okay.
And that is, there's 4 residents that are being asked to join the tax ceiling task force. And the task force just wanted to handle it internally and instead of having two different committees vote and then having to bring back to make this move a little faster, we just wanted to make sure the select board had no problem with that we would just choose the 4 residents within the task force, rather than appointed by the select board and school committee.
So you're looking for a motion to delegate to the task force
That sounds
assigning
good.
membership? Well, but I'm not sure I should make it since I'm on the task
Well,
force.
I am too, so where does that leave us? That we're just looking for a feeling among the other 2 of you.
Okay.
Do you have a problem with that?
I don't have a problem with it. You
Okay.
guys are closer to the
Okay.
subject than I am.
Yeah, we could
right now.
have a motion.
Okay.
Okay, so,
We're fine. We just wanted to inform you guys and make sure there was no problem with that.
okay, well, we could vote on it, but
But it's just the
there's
2 of
only
you.
2 of us. We wouldn't have a-
We can vote.
We can vote, you-
We can vote. I
We
just
can
wasn't
vote?
going to make the motion,
Oh,
yeah.
okay.
Okay,
So moved.
But,
so moved. 4
The
That means
residents.
you
motion
have
is
to
that
second it.
the task force
We'll
have
delegate
be delegated the authority to appoint members.
to appoint members. Okay, and I'll second it. Any further discussion? Okay, all those in favor? Okay.
Thank you. I just wanted to get that in before
But
the
you
lights went
have
out.
had volunteers, obviously.
Well, I understood for the 3 positions, we have 2, maybe 3 applications. And instead of having to see who was who and take extra
Oh, I
weeks
see.
on
Yeah, yeah,
end
yeah.
to vote them in, we just wanted to move it along a little faster. Thanks.
Okay, great. So now we want to go back to the goals. We have a few minutes before the lights go out, right? What time do they go out?
In about 5 minutes, 10 minutes.
5 minutes?
Of course, if he's listening to us, he might turn him off early.
I texted him about 10 minutes ago.
Oh, you did?
No, I did not. I wish I had, now that I say that. So I guess I want to, if I may, Tom?
Yes.
Marie, I want to pick on a comment you made, which get stuff done.
Yeah.
And this is a list of stuff that we want to get done. It may not be your list, but it's a list of stuff we want to get done. And I guess I'm like, it's okay. This is just my suggestion. But I don't want to, it just seems like it's being viewed as like totally inadequate when,
Okay, if I wanted to call you totally inadequate, I would. Okay, and when I said I want to get things done, in other words, let's go through this list rather than go back to describing the main structure of the list. I said, let's just go through the list and get it done. So I
Right.
was not insulting you and your list and not
Right.
getting things done. That's what I was talking about. Okay.
And I don't imagine you've been overwhelmed with things to put on this list.
well, I try and make it stuff that reflects what we're actually doing, plus things that I know what you all have talked about as goals. We talked a bunch at the beginning about the bylaws. Bylaws to improve the quality of life in our community are things that generally are important to you. I live in them very specifically every single day,
Yeah.
which is why, and so do the members of the bylaw task force. So the bylaw task force says, listen, this is stuff that's coming across our radar in a very meaningful way. Let's present this stuff to the select board, because we know that their goals of improving the quality of life and giving better tools to address issues that were complained about need to be something that you guys want, solutions to those types of issues. So that's why we come up with these things. And so that's kind of a specific thing that comes, the specific bylaw recommendations are goals that are generated by the broader goal of the quality of life bylaws. So, the stuff about OPEB are things, we actually ended up accomplishing. One of those became, a lot of this stuff became I drafted this, like I said, I think back in February. And so a lot of the stuff is on the warrant now. Part of the goals are to have it on the warrant, and that's, so we've accomplished some of these.
Okay. Now, what happens if the camera, we have to say, sign out, right? So we have 2 minutes. So
If
I
we're
don't
really
want to
gonna
cut you
just-
off, so we will revisit this at some point.
I mean, the GFO, Paul and the finance department really wanted to put together like a final draft of the GFOA budget document and get it printed before the town meeting. So to some extent, we are on a bit of a deadline to
Well, I
put
don't
these in.
think, I guess I'm frustrated because you're not really interested in our input in this. Because you never really asked us what we would like to see on the list. and now we're being shown it and say, well, we would like you to approve,
That's
so we're
not true,
gonna publish
Marie.
it.
I
I
gave
don't
this,
think-
I
I
gave this
think
list like a
we've
month
been- this
ago,
has been
and
Yeah,
the
but
board's
when
had
we
the opportunity to send Debbie the feedback to put on the agenda. I mean, it's,
But when
I
we
gave it a month
start
ago,
to
and
talk
when I
it-
first gave it to you, I said,
Yeah,
here's my
fine.
ideas, here you go.
That's the
Yeah.
way it is. That's fine, that's fine.
I
You know,
think he's definitely been asking for stuff for a long time.
when we're trying to discuss it now, we're just being shut down. That's it. This is it,
Yeah,
and
I
this is
agree
the
now,
goals, and
yes.
this is it.
Only on
So-
the format is what I've said I am frustrated with, because the goalposts on the format try to get moved every year, and I'm like, I took the format we used last year and just changed some of the items, and I gave it to the board a month ago and said, add stuff, and you said, I'm gonna add stuff from my list, and I guess I would've thought that would've happened,
I
but
thought we were supposed to do it at a meeting now. I didn't realize it had to be sent ahead of time. I thought we were all gonna just start discussing it, but that's all right. That's fine.
Well, can we have a motion to, approve this preliminary list, and then we can add things to it in the near future? I mean, this is not a closed document.
No, I'll send my list then.
Okay. So can we get a motion to approve this as is, and then maybe we'll have another look at it?
So moved.
Okay, in a second? I guess I will second it. Any further discussion? Okay, well, we'll see if we can, those in favor? Okay, those opposed? All right, so it sits until we get more information on it. And we will close this meeting up. I'm calling for adjournment. Motion adjourned?
So moved.
Okay, seconded. All those in favor? Okay, thank you for joining us. Most people are probably watching the national championship. I hope it was a good one. Good night.